Welcome to the Visual Cast. Coming at you from California, I'm your host, Alon Hammer, aka Rem. The Visual Cast is a hybrid podcast where we sit down with some of the best, most interesting, and most exciting visual artists from all over the world. We chat about life, art, visuals, software, hardware, systems, crystals, alien downloads, spirituality, and catalysts. It's essentially a massive nerd out. But the guests also do a set where we dive into their computer and get an up-and-close look at how they make art, how they perform art, or really anything they want to share with us. I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. To support us, please like and subscribe, follow us on Instagram, and leave us a review on Spotify. Now, without any further ado, here's the Visual Cast.
The world is like a ride at an amusement park, and it's fun for a while. Some people have been on the ride for a long time, and they begin to question, is this real, or is this just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us, and they say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid, ever, because this is just a ride.
Alrighty, welcome to the podcast. Joined today by a very special guest, really unique and interesting individual. A little bit of a departure from our normal touch designer, kind of visual artist VJ. But that is the whole point of this podcast, to talk to interesting and unique individuals. And I think that's a good enough introduction for now. Welcome to the podcast, Kitae Kim.
Hello. Hi, Alon. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hell yeah. So I'll jump right into it. I start off with a more scripted question, and we can kind of get a little bit more about you, and then we'll go on to a conversation. Kitae.
Okay.
Kitae. Since the master, Matthew Reagan, introduced me and our viewers to the awesome Foveate, the program Foveate, I've been super intrigued by you. And massive, huge shout out to Matthew for making the introduction to us. Foveate is a super powerful online 3D spatial platform for visualizing events, spaces, ideas, and really anything in 3 dimensions. It's the evolution of something lame like Frame.io and a super Web3, 3D interactive, immersive, super high fidelity software. But besides co-founding Foveate, you are also an extremely impressive artist, architecture, and designer. From massive interactive installations to beautiful and thought-provoking visual art, you have gotten your feet wet, to say the least. So to start off, where does the intersection of architecture and art happen, and where can it be forgotten or lost?
That's an excellent question. I think for me, my background is I was always interested in space and 3 dimensions and science fiction. So I originally decided to study art and design to get into that and really interrogate how kind of digital media and media environments especially were becoming normal in our society, and how they could kind of contribute to an experience that takes people out of the everyday. I was very young when I started this, so it was kind of like, I guess you look back on it, maybe a form of escapism to some extent, looking at that. But my interest was not always with screens per se, projectors, LED walls, but in really spatial art, like installations that had a sculptural component that really enveloped you in it. And that led me to architecture, where I wanted to really figure out, how do people actually create these things? Because as an artist, you're really thinking about experience. But then when you get your training in architecture, you're really thinking about, how do I build this thing? How do I make it stand up, have people flow in it? Like architecture is really the area where I got to cut my teeth and learn about how people use things, how people inhabit space, how people perceive space. And that kind of set the foundation for my journey to what would eventually become Foveate.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, it's at the end of the day, like space, this is like maybe a little bit out there, but space is kind of like everything, right? I mean, not everything. Time is also involved, and there's a lot of other things involved, but space is kind of like, at least the idea of space, like the 3 dimensions that we kind of operate in and live in, is kind of like very important to understand the relationship between things, right? Which is kind of like the art of architecture, is not just like how to erect a building, but also like what is the relationship of this building to its function, to its environment. How does the inside relate to the outside? How does the interaction relate to it? And I think it's like kind of maybe almost one of the oldest forms of that kind of relation, right? Like if you think about like pyramids or ancient architecture or ancient kind of structures, those are kind of like the earliest forms of art that we know of, besides like something like a cave painting, which is not really spatial in that sense. It's much more like that's what they had in the moment. They had a cave and they had some dye. And like if you look at like some ancient civilizations, like the first, even like the ones that they're finding now, like the Göbekli Tepe in Turkey and stuff like that.
Down in Turkey.
All the Graham Hancock stuff. Like it's crazy how old that kind of idea of like, oh, we have the ability to form a structure and shape something to maybe tell our history, to maybe do science, to maybe leave a message for the future. And it's through architecture. It's through like structural buildings. I just find that so kind of interesting when we look at things like that that we're quote unquote interested in, like interactive installations, immersive installations, even virtual reality, augmented reality. They're all kind of the foundation of them. And I've really never thought about this really until this moment, but the foundation of them is kind of in that ethos of like spatial interaction and how we relate to it, right? It's very interesting in that sense.
Architecture is oftentimes called the third skin, where your first skin is, of course, your body, your second skin is clothing, and then architecture is the third one. And I always love architecture because, it predates so many things in human culture, and we are always having a spatial experience no matter where we are in the world. And I think when you think about the difference between how you feel in a cave versus a forest versus an ocean versus a desert versus a city, it all feels totally different, and you kind of know a good space when you feel it. And there's studies of how walking down a ramp, for example, will lower your heartbeat. And that's so fascinating because it's like, oh, there's these like very little things, subtle things related to how our body is moving through the world that affects who we are and how we perceive things. And I think it's got to be one of the most interesting concepts that's kind of hard to put your finger on, in the sense that architecture is really where design, engineering, and art kind of all break even, at least to me, because it incorporates so many of these things. Like you've been in a horrible, back rooms office experience, like in the back room of a mall, and you're like, I'm terrified of this space. Everything's bland and the same. I grew up in the suburbs, so we had a lot of those where I grew up, and it was so
I have it
interesting
whenever I travel and like go to these hotels, and they're just like, especially now, that company, what do they call that annoying fucking company that bought all the hotels? Whatever. It's like a group of hotels I don't remember what they're called. Like every hotel looks the same. It's all the same thing. And it's like, okay, they're clean, fine, they're nice and like whatever, but it's like I'd feel like trapped, It's like there's no, it's like the difference of like a hotel in the States, just like a normal hotel in the States, like a 3-4 star hotel that's like clean, gonna, in a good location, versus like something in Europe, which is like, it could be like old style or like a cottage almost, but same price point, same kind of thing, boutique, and it's like just the it's so different. It's just very interesting in that sense, how that really can have an effect on you. And another thing that I really love, and we can definitely talk about this in the second portion where we can get a little bit more deeper into it, but just as a way to kind of a little bit introduce your work as well to the audience, the idea of, and I don't know your stance on this, so we can definitely get deeper into it, but the idea of architecture as some form of like sacred, or I should say maybe like ultra expression kind of mechanism. Like that's kind of where I think museum installations or art installations kind of really find this kind of expression inside of architecture, inside of like structural design. And just to show off a little bit of your work while we kind of talk about this, like, something like this beautiful piece over here, or like I had this one that I picked out that I really loved. This kind of spherical shape with these, eyes looking at you or cameras looking at you, kind of, I know there's like little speakers that kind of emit some sound, but it's just, this kind of idea of like, how is the space going to affect people? And then hopefully the goal is to kind of, make them feel good or at least think about things. And for myself, coming from like projection mapping, that's like the whole point of it, right? Is to take something that exists in 3D world that you can't necessarily change and alter, and then change and alter it in a way that you wouldn't be able to do in 3D space.
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, many of these works, cool. I worked for this artist, Raphael Lozano-Hemmer, up in Montreal for about 5-6 years, where I was the lead architect and designer and visualizer there. So, I worked super closely with Rafa. He would just kind of like tell me these ideas that he had for an artwork or installation, and it was my job to basically help concept them, design them, figure out how people would interact with them. So that's really where I got into real-time visualization, and I introduced tools like Unreal and Touch Designer, Grasshopper, Rhino, VR to the studio. This is back in like 2016 to 21 is when I did all this. So his work, very mediated, very interactive, very physical, very analog. And these are all things that are really difficult to communicate to someone, especially before they exist, right? So my job was, how do we design these things using kind of architectural knowledge of how people will navigate and circulate and physically be with these, and then how do we pre-visualize them? And when I say pre-visualize in this context, it's much more about kind of designing the feeling that we want someone to have inside one of these artworks, rather than just what it looks like, which where typical ArcViz begins and ends. It's just a pretty picture. For us, it's this one's called Bach, after Johann Sebastian Bach. So it actually is a orb that has I think 1,028 speakers, and each one of those lights is a speaker. Or rather, it shows the activation of the speaker, and eventually all of these speakers will play at the same time, and each speaker is a separate Johann Sebastian Bach symphony. So it plays all of his compositions at once. So Steve Reich has this idea of cacophony, and that's kind of what this piece does. So that kind of point cloud
love
image.
This like like it's I don't know if it's part of the installation as well, but just like the way it's kind of like it's so analog. It's like we're so used to like one Ethernet cable or something, and like all of a sudden you have all these, like, it's just such a it just feels like a machine, or like some sort of like something coming from some sort of space. It's really cool. Very sci-fi.
We had miles of cable. It's kind of like an organ, I would say. It's very
like everything. That's so cool.
Tactile in that way.
I definitely want to talk about your work with Raphael Lozano-Hemmer. Is he Spanish?
He's Mexican. From Mexico City, but emigrated to Canada, I believe, when he was a teenager. So he's
cool.
He's still been in Montreal, so he's been there for decades.
Talk about that. I always find it super fascinating when young aspiring artists go and work for a well-established artist and like kind of reinvent them in some way, or at least offer them tools to reinvent themselves, or allow them to like still be relevant. It's always very interesting when that happens. I think it's underrated, because you get all the experience and knowledge while also helping them invigorate themselves, which is gonna again give you more knowledge and experience. And having mentors is like one of those things that I feel like is so underappreciated in today's world, with like, it's like a catch-22, right? We have all these forums and YouTube and Facebook groups where we can get all this information and it's almost like instant. But sitting and spending time with somebody as a mentor, living their life, like following how they live their life, is like extremely important. And for myself, I mean, every time I've had the opportunity to like go and live with somebody, maybe not now anymore that I have a kid, but like when I was younger, I got the opportunity to do that a few times. It's miles of inspiration that lasts forever, and you get to kind of get a view into like maybe something. Like an example for me would be I was living with my friend Rich in Austria, and he had a very specific lifestyle. And I was kind of in that lifestyle with him for a little bit, and I kind of realized I don't want this lifestyle for myself. That was a realization that I only would have had through that experience. But, you know, all the knowledge and inspiration that I got from being there gave me the wherewithal to be like, okay, I want to still pursue this, but differently, you know, which I thought was really, you know, I think it's really invaluable. So yeah, it's really cool. I definitely want to talk about you going there, but just to jump back a little bit, you grew up in Boston. You're now living in New York. You know, give us a little bit about growing up in Boston, living in New York. You know, maybe those two things are separate, but what was it like growing up in Boston? You know, what was your home life like? Did you always want to be an artist? Did you always want to study, you know, art and design and architecture? Was there some, inspiration from a young age that you were kind of trying to follow or emulate? You know, share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I grew up in a little suburb outside of Boston called Wellesley, where Wellesley College is, which is all women's college. And
wow.
Wellesley, interestingly enough,
that's a great place to grow up.
Yeah, it's a good place to grow up. But I would say it's interesting because it's a very particular kind of suburb, you know, like very waspy. It was also a dry town when I was growing up, so you can imagine how that affects some of the culture.
What's a dry town? Like no alcohol?
Oh, no alcohol. Yeah. So
it's
no
banned?
liquor stores, no bars. Yeah, it's just illegal.
Wow.
You have to go
That's
drive
crazy.
to a separate.
I kind of like that,
yeah.
to be honest. I'd be down for that for sure.
I think it's interesting in the sense that it changes how people. I guess it changes who decides to live there. Because you know, in some respect, everybody's okay with that. So yeah, so it's a little bit more conservative in that sense. And then, not that I'm like a big drinker or anything. It's just kind of like, you know, one of those interesting tidbits that you think about growing up. You're like, oh wow, that was like a bit weird. Like maybe it does kind of push people to like party really hard when they're in high school or something.
Oh, right. The opposite.
You know, kind of like that inverse effect. Definitely had friends who, you know, are super interested into that. But yeah, so Boston was a very small, you know, city. Boston in general, even if I had grown up there, and very conservative in many ways, in the sense of when it comes to culture, you know, art in particular. Even though Boston has many museums, the ICA in Boston was the newest museum in 100 years before it opened, and it opened when I was in high school. So that kind of just, you know, tells you something about how art and culture there is really affected. I mean, for example, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston is a huge establishment. They have some of the greatest paintings on the earth in there. So I grew up going to that museum all the time. You know, a big fan of art. But, you know, all the art in there is more of a certain era. You know, let's say like John Singer Sargent's kind of like that area of like 1800s painters, you know. So that was beautiful stuff. And I always found myself more drawn to the ancient collections, you know, things from Egypt or Greece or Africa, Asia, things like that. And I would spend a lot of my summers drawing in that museum. But it's only when I got to the end of high school, I kind of figured out that like I don't want to be someone who just draws. Like it just wasn't enough for me. And I remember, it's actually funny, in high school, looking at projection mapping, and being like, wow, that's super cool. I would love to learn how to do that. And my dad had a projector, And so I found out a way to hook it up to his old laptop. And then this is back in 2011 or 12, but I actually installed Touch Designer and Blender back then. This is back
Nice.
when Blender was right click only. Yeah. And we had the old version of Touch. And I actually projection
The two
mapped.
buttons I have.
Yeah, I actually projection mapped a cardboard box that I had papered white. And I was able to projection map all three faces. And then I
No
had
way.
a party.
That's
And I was
awesome.
like, guys, check it out.
That's awesome.
And everybody thought it was so cool because, like, as a high schooler, no one's seen this shit
Well,
before.
it's like, I mean,
So-
it's magic when it's done, right? Like, especially for even on a simple like, here's a box, it's magic, because it's the spatial, like that is like the spatial thing coming out into the world. It's like it's really magic. That's so cool that you did that, though. I love that.
Yeah, it really is like an illusion, right? Where
Totally.
if people have never seen that before, they see it and they're like, I don't even know how this is possible.
How many
Like, that one
projectors do you
projector
have?
somehow-
That's always the question.
Yeah.
Like, how do you have so many projectors? Like, no, it's just the one.
Just one.
Just
Yeah.
one.
Just the
Or
cube is
whatever.
oriented
Sometimes
right.
sometimes it's a bunch of them, but So were you kind of like nerdy in terms of just like being able to pick up a computer and download all these softwares, or was it more of just like you had a goal to do this projection mapping and you figured it out?
I would say that I've always been comfortable with computers, but I wouldn't say that. I was never a developer. I would never call myself a developer. Like, yeah, I can write some Python, but mostly visual programming and modeling is what I was into. So I would say definitely more of a designer mentality. And I choose that term because when I think of artists, for the most part, I think about people like, I guess more like a painter or something like that, someone who is kind of more hands-on in a way and conceptual. And then when I think about a typical developer or programmer, much more in the code, like they're optimizing shaders, I don't know, writing C++ or something. So I really don't see myself as either of those camps. So I like to say designer because it kind of straddles the line of, someone who can write some code, who is good at producing graphics and real-time experiences,
Right.
but, all of it is
More
very
focused.
grounded in space and how someone interacts with that artwork, with that experience. How are they going to feel? That's really more of my concern, rather than an artist might be like, well, how do I feel? I feel like that's really what most artists try to do, and then they give that to the world, and people like it or they don't.
Interesting. That is a really good distinction of an artist and a designer. I like that. So it was kind of clear to you to go study art. You're kind of painting and drawing and being, the cool guy with the projection mapping. Was it clear to you to go study art and design?
Well, I definitely wanted to study design, and architecture was of interest. I actually did a summer camp at Boston Architectural College because one of my friends convinced me. And I was like, all right, well, like, I guess I'll come with you, because he was like begging me to go with him. And then we get there, and it's like a couple of month-long program, and he's just so done with it. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing.
He never wants to
We
see
get
it
to
again,
use like
and you're
laser cutters and 3D
Oh,
printers
cool.
for
That's
drawing,
awesome.
or modeling, building chairs. Yeah. And he was like, dude, I'm done. This was a mistake.
That's really
So
funny.
it was just funny how, mistakes like that really, lead you to paths. Just gotta take a chance sometimes.
Definitely, it's not a mistake, right? It's a journey or whatever. It's the yeah. I mean, it's like how you get to places is always like a mystery, right? Like
Yeah.
yeah, it's always like a really big trip to think about how you found
Draw
something.
this crazy path.
Squiggle around, and then you come back to the same place you started at. Sometimes, you're like, oh, okay. Okay, so you were telling me that you started studying art and design, and then you switched to architecture. What was the catalyst, my favorite word, to switch to architecture?
For me, there was I was in art and design for like a year and a half, and my focus was always, in spaces, installations. Like I really wanted to make installation art, and University of Michigan just did not have a focus in that particular realm, and I was really interested, in 3D and graphics and stuff like that. And there was really no professors who were really interested in that or who could even mentor me along that path. And the architecture school is actually in the same building, but just one floor up. So I remember going up there and being like, oh, wow, these guys are doing like way cooler artwork than the people in the art school, really, or at least to me, because they got to use all the fancy toys like digital fabrication, 3D printing, laser cutters. They were casting concrete. And Michigan was a really great school in the sense that the undergrad program had a lot of kind of conceptual influence from one half of the professors, and then the other half was very computational. And this is kind of like when Grasshopper was getting big and stuff like that, and a little bit of Unity and things like that. So that side was really interested in construction and being able to kind of innovate in areas of architecture and with materials that were totally decades ahead of the industry. So, I had professors who were 3D printing carbon fiber and making like modular carbon fiber elements that could stack and build structures that were super lightweight. And, they were imagining them being used in like Antarctica or extreme environments. And also, many of them had a conceptual side where they were imagining them, more as artworks rather than just purely functional architecture. So that kind of led me to that camp where I was like, oh, wow, these people are really doing really awesome work. And my aunt, well, she's not really an aunt, she's a family friend who we call an aunt, but she is someone who recommended University of Michigan. She's like, oh, you should apply here. She's an architect. Her and her husband are both
cool.
architects. So
Cool.
that was interesting guidance as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's always nice to have that, guidance or, inspiration, somebody that you can like look up to and be like, oh, they did it. I can maybe try to do something as well. I think it's important, Architecture maybe is like a lot more safer than like being an artist per se, right? It's a lot more applicable. Like you can, I don't know about easily, but you can, I guess it's the same thing with a designer. You can go work for like some studio and be a designer at a studio. You can be an architect at some big corporation or something. But I feel like it's a little bit more like needed, or maybe like a little bit more practical, maybe, like the skills that you would learn as an architect versus the skills that you learn as a designer. But I don't know, maybe that's kind of, maybe that's not true anymore. I don't know. Did you feel that when you were studying it?
It depends, because if you were at my undergrad program, so much of it was so artistic and creative. You might be like, oh, I don't know if all these are applicable. What am I going to do with this? Right. Yeah, to a job. But the thing is, it was so fun. Like that was such a freeing place where everybody got to explore ideas that nobody cared. Oh, and the professors, they didn't care either, because they were like, listen, you guys are going to go into the industry. You're going to have to learn how to use Revit, and you're going to learn it there. And you're going to be dying for a program where you got to be creative and express yourself and have fun and do R&D and innovate and learn all these new tools. So they were like, don't think of this as like a vocational training, but we're here to teach you concepts of architecture, what makes a good space, how do you influence people in a space, how do you like design programs or functions, and also teach you how to teach yourself. How do you teach yourself the latest program? How do you teach yourself graphic design or branding or wayfinding or all these things that kind of go into architecture. So I'm very thankful for that program, and it had such a rich historical component as well. We had to learn all the way back up to ancient architecture, primitive huts, pyramids, stuff like that. So
that's awesome.
We got all
that's
of it.
Awesome. That's super important to learn that history and get that kind of overarching thing. And that's really what the best type of school is. It's like a really good mixture of experimentation and exploration with a guidance or a hand holding, or even better, somebody who can like, oh, you want to explore this thing? Try this, right? Like almost like just open up a bunch of doors for you, not even holding your hand, just open up a bunch of doors. So I heard that when I was doing some research about you, I saw that you discovered VR during your college days. Is that correct? Like you had in one of the labs, you had the access to VR. So, I mean, I think VR is kind of your maybe not forte, but definitely, I mean, I would imagine it's something that led you very heavily into Foveate, just in terms of like the way Foveate kind of is this, 3D interface of like understanding space and structure. And VR is kind of the same thing, right? Just in a headset. So yeah, I mean, like, was discovering VR very eye-opening to you, for lack of a better term, and kind of what was what was the like what was it about VR that you were like, oh, this is definitely the future and definitely what I'm gonna elevate myself with, kind of thing.
It's funny you asked me this question because I was just thinking about this today with
hell
the
yeah.
announcement of Android XR. But I was thinking, why was I so interested in VR? And previously, when I was in high school, that's when Vimeo came out. And for people who don't remember Vimeo back in 2010 or 2008, it was just like an amazing platform for creative people to make all these short films and really express themselves in a way that wasn't possible before. Like, there was YouTube, but that was pretty like lowbrow, just kind of everything. But then Vimeo was
YouTube was just
YouTube Vimeo was like, there are artists on this platform, right?
Exactly.
And it kind of made me realize the reason why I think Vimeo and I was so interested in film back in that time in my life was that was the most immersive experience one could get, where you are being literally placed into a story, and there's these brain scans that have been done of people watching films in the movie theater, and their brain activity patterns mimic that of dreaming, right? So experiencing a film, it's kind of like dreaming, where you're jumping through time. You really feel like you're in that place. You resonate with this character. Someone gets smacked, like it hurts you almost. And that was the best one could get at that time, right? Like, instantly accessible, so vivid and clear. And then at University of Michigan, we had a library called the Duderstat, and that's where one of my best friends, Ian, who's also the co-founder of Foveate, he and I decided to go one day, I think it was like senior year, and try the new Oculus DK2 because we had a developer kit there. And we tried it on. It was just like this house demo, one of the earliest demos, and we were both blown away. We were like, holy shit, this is the most crazy technology and kind of experience we've ever had. It was like, taking drugs or something. Like, you're just in a completely different mental state, different place. You feel like you could be a different person. So that's when I think I realized that VR was now the most powerful and immersive medium. And once there's like a time before you've done VR, right, and a time after. And after you've done it, you're like, well, nothing's quite the same now that I've done that before. You come out feeling shaky, right? You're like, oh, I don't even know where I am. I'm so disoriented.
If it's done well, I mean, sometimes you also come out like you want to like throw up, and
you're like, oh, this is horrible.
Super motion sickness.
But as an architect, being able to use VR, and I was trying to use it for one of my projects, senior year. I was just super interested in it because like my project was very sculptural. It was a series of hands that I had photo scanned my own, and then kind of de-resed into these kind of pointy, kind of triangular shapes of the fingers, and they were all in different positions, making like a sculpture park for this conceptual site in Chicago. Awesome. They would be panelized metal with little holes in them, where LEDs would be inside so that they could glow.
Oh wow!
And I really wanted to show this, in VR. So that's when I started to get into it, because I was like, well, I would have liked to experience this myself, because it's so conceptual, right? Like, no one can tell you how this is going to feel. It'd be great to see how maybe terrifying or fun or surreal this experience is. So that was my early foray into VR, and then I really got into it once I was using it at Rafa's, and I kind of like forced us to buy a Vive, and I got to do a lot of I had a lot of agency and a lot of freedom to introduce tooling, because And this is a funny story. But actually, I got that job at Rafa Studio because Rafa came to give a lecture at the University of Michigan back when I was in art school. And his work is insane. He's been doing media artwork since like the 90s. You know, I remember he had this one installation that was, I think it was like 50 spotlights on the rooftops of Zocalo Square in Mexico City, which is like a public forum. And people could log on to a website this is the early 2000s, and direct all the searchlights and position them in space. And then they would change every like 10 minutes with a new person's configuration. I remember seeing this and be like, holy shit, this guy's work is crazy. And then I ended up reaching out to the person who organized the lecture series once I had graduated. Her name was Christina Hamilton. And I was like, hey, Christina, like, do you remember that crazy Mexican artist guy? Like, I really want to reach out to him. And she ended up giving me the email of somebody who used to work there who referred me to him. And then they were on vacation, so they didn't respond for 2 weeks. But this is right around when Brexit was happening. So I actually wrote him a cold email about Brexit, just talking about how, I feel like this was kind of a turning point for creative people, and kind of the world. And he's a very like a socialist-minded architect. A lot of his work is about democracy and like democratic inputs into making artwork together. How do people represent themselves in a city and make themselves known? So I wrote about that, and I basically just told them, I think you need architects. Like, you have such spatial work, but you have no architects on your team, or so I hoped. So I kind of just like pitched myself to him, and he didn't respond for a couple weeks because they were on vacation, which I didn't know. But I was like, he probably just thought I was some weird kid. But later on, he responded, and he was like, this was a really weird email to receive, but I think we should meet. So then we just ended up having a Skype call, and he asked me to move to Montreal next week. And I was like, I can't do 1 week, but 2 weeks. So I ended up just moving there, and then I was there for 5-6 years. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I mean, his work is pretty spectacular. I was kind of getting a little bit introduced to it while doing some research for this. Very interesting, and it seems like it's very clear that there was, not to I mean, definitely to boost you, because obviously you're a very big part of that, but it seems like there's like a before and after, or like at least like a more original kind of like stuff, and then what he kind of ended up doing more recently. And it also seems like you introduced like a whole, besides for the architecture element, it seems like you introduced like a whole aspect of pre-visualization and VR and ways to kind of like, I don't know if sell is the right way, but like ways to express what could be with something that's very, unique to his type of artwork. Was that like a hard thing to implement, into his studio? What was it like working with such a high level and established artist that kind of, I don't know him personally, but just from my experience with well-established artists, they usually are pretty stuck in their ways,
He's super open-minded, and that's one of the greatest things about Rafa is awesome. He's really open to how people accomplish work, because the nature of his work is so technological that oftentimes means keeping up with technology. But Rafa always has been able to maintain his own style, which is very analog, which has been pretty cool. But yeah, when I first started, like I said, I pitched myself, right? So he hired me, had no idea what to do with me. So for the first like month or so, I was given almost no direction. It was just kind of like, well, here's your desk, and like, all right, like, let's see what you can do.
Was it just you?
And I was the new hire, but at that time it was about 8 people.
Wow.
And over the course of my time there, we grew to about 20. So
wow, that's amazing.
We really kind of blew up after that. And not to toot my own horn, but I think part of that was me joining, because my first year there, I only worked on proposals, and we got really good at doing those proposals. And you said selling, and that's a correct term. A lot of artists don't like to use that, but you have to be able to know how to sell, and part of being able to sell is having good visuals and immersing a client in your idea, such that they understand it, which allows them to fall in love with it. So that's really what I ended up doing for the first year there, and in addition to designing the artworks, because for most people, and this is how Rafa started, or how the process went, before I got there, they're making Photoshop collages of their artworks, and that's how they're pitching them to clients. So you have this very unrealistic, like, melange of images, right, that you put inside of a deck, and maybe you have a series of them to explain time. But of course, to a client, like, that is so abstract, like, they can't understand that, right? And for Rafa's work, it's so hard to describe. Like, if you're telling someone, I'm going to make an orb that's 3 meters tall or 10 feet tall, with 1,028 speakers in it, all playing at the same time, the client's like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. But if you have somebody like me model that in Rhino and Grasshopper, it's parametrically arrayed. There's technical drawings that go with it. There's an immersive VR experience the client can put on here and move through the space. They get it. And that's really how we were able to get so many of those insane projects done. Like, people always ask, like, how did you do this? And it's like, well, we sold them on the vision from day one. Like, there was never a confusion for what we were going to deliver, once we were able to use real-time technology.
It's not only, I mean, it's super, definitely not tooting your own horn. I think that's like really kind of, it's very clear that that was like a big trajectory for the studio. But it's also not only for the client side of selling, it's also for the team, right? If you're working with 20 people and you have some artist that has like, oh, I have this idea for a sphere with speakers, and the team's like, okay, Rafa, like, oh, okay. It's also for the team. And then through the process of creating these designs and creating these Grasshopper sketches, you now have blueprints that are going to be utilized, and you're kind of like, the idea of pre-visualizing something is so important that I think probably for you as an architecture person coming from that world, it's like, obviously you have a blueprint and that's what you work from, right? Like you make a drawing and that's what you utilize to do. And it's like, that's so, it's not always obvious to installation designers or whatever artists, like classical artists, because it's like, I just have an idea and I'm going to now make it, right? But it's like, there's a lot of processes that you have to go from that to that, especially if you're working in a team of people. So I think having a really good workflow for that is clearly really important. Super cool. I wanted to talk more about projection mapping, but you kind of mentioned it before that you kind of found it as a young lad, and played around with it. I find that so cool. Like, do you remember what the thing you saw in high school was that kind of that you were intrigued by it?
I'm trying to remember. I was when I mentioned it earlier, I was trying to remember exactly which one it was.
Was it like an art thing, or was it a party? Was it like an event, or
No, I think it was definitely an installation artist.
Gotcha. So
I can't remember off the top of my head, but it wasn't like a corporate thing. Yeah,
that's fine. Was it something that, after you got to do this thing for your friends, you got like, oh, I'm a magician, I can now play with this thing. Was it something that you strived or tried to do as often as possible? Like, was it, how do I rephrase that in a much more question way? Like, what about it was magic to you? Like, what was the thing about it that made you really like fall in love with it, and then getting that kind of response and feedback from people? What was that feeling like?
Yeah, I think kind of going back to my comment earlier about drawing, I always liked drawing. I liked imagery, but I knew I wasn't the best at it. And then with projection mapping, I kind of figured, oh, this is pretty niche, and I'm interested in it. I'm good at it. Like, I should just keep doing this. And, in college, there were a couple events that I was a VJ on, and that's like how I made some side money. Nice. And also, a lot of my friends were musicians, and I was like, I can play piano, but I'm not like good enough to play with these guys. But I can do projections for their set. So it was just something I kept on doing. And I think part of it, honestly, was just having access to my dad's old projector, which was like this. I forget what company it was now, but it's like this old silver business projector, like definitely not meant to be, you know, used for
Used for crazy
installations. But
shit. Yeah,
yeah, I just would have that in a tripod. I'm like, shit, I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna load
that's
up
awesome.
VDMX or something, just do some mapping.
VDMX, huh?
And I,
Nice,
my friend, this is
nice.
back in like 2014 or whatever. But then my friend Ian gave me his little MIDI controller, little piano, and then he showed me how to map VDMX to it, so that I could play it, and to sequence and like switch between all these different clips and fades with the knobs and stuff. And it just became like an instrument. So that was kind of like just a fun thing that I was able to do
It's
on the
awesome.
side. Like I never thought about it as a career.
Right. But you managed to VJ a bunch of places. I didn't know that. That's so cool. That's awesome that you got that experience. Like, did you ever think about taking it further and like, trying to do it more as a like career, or not just like a side hustle or just like a college job,
Mm, not really for projection mapping. I guess
or
I
just
didn't
VJing
really.
in general?
Yeah, I know. I just didn't really think of it as a job, I guess. It didn't
Mm,
like really cross my mind. And then
mm.
for me, that was just kind of like an easy way to get into it.
Right.
But
You have a
really, like what
skill
I,
and you know something.
yeah, but I really wanted to make spaces and experiences,
Mm,
right? So I think that's where typical projection mapping kind of like falls off for me. Like,
totally.
let's say there's like Team Lab or something. I mean, that's projection mapping on steroids. But
Right.
at the end of the day, a lot of that stuff is pretty flat on walls. I
Mm,
think now they're starting to get into more custom mapping on
mm-hmm,
objects and custom architectural stuff, which I really
mm-hmm,
like, um, because I get kind of bored with flat things, and that's where
mm,
really VR became super interesting to me. Because I'm like, oh, this is about space, this is about form, this is
mm.
about you objects, or
Interesting.
more tactile feeling experiences.
Yeah.
So I think the flatness of a lot of projection mapping is somewhere where I'm like, oh, I want to be able to like work with the space. Like I would love to
Mm,
projection map or work with projection mapping in a really uh, particular architectural environment,
mm-hmm.
like I don't know, like a cave or something, where it's
Mm,
like, oh, there's all these
yeah.
natural things. We got to figure out how to work with them, kind of thing.
Totally. I love that. So, okay, so moving on a little bit to current, uh, Kitae. Um, you have found this awesome company called Foveate, co-founded this awesome company called Foveate. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a look at here while we talk about it.
Sure.
And then we're also going to jump into it. So, definitely stick around for that. But yeah, tell me about it a little bit. What was the catalyst of wanting to start a company like this? I'm assuming that you were trying to solve a big problem that we all face, and
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about it.
Sure. So basically, the kind of crux of Foveate started during COVID, where like I was saying, we were making all these crazy installations, and at the like 2019, right before COVID, the studio was big. We were like 20 people. We were just churning out work. Um, we were so busy, making the biggest, baddest installations, biggest budgets we've ever had, most complicated artworks. Um, things where it's like a wall of fog that could, take your voice, turn it into text, and write it inside of
I
the
saw that
fog,
one. It
stuff
looks
like
super
that.
cool. Yeah.
That was for the Manchester International Festival, and that had 32 projectors, over
Wow.
3,000 speakers, um, fog artworks like that, like other custom interactive things. Um, and I just remember we had such a hard time pulling that job off. It was a nightmare, and it was remote, right? Or we designed it remotely because it's supposed to be in Manchester, so we had to build a venue out of 52 shipping containers. And trying to work on that, I pre-visualized it all in Unreal and would create these
Mm,
walkthroughs and rendered images. And it
mm,
was still so tough to work on that thing. And then COVID happened, and we still had to deliver on a lot of projects. We still had some, and we had to work remotely on them. And I was like, oh shit, if I can't fly to the client with my
Right.
beefy MSI laptop and walk them through Unreal sitting next to them,
What are
like
you
it's
gonna
just
do?
impossible for them to get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember
Yeah. Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
time, a lot of folks in the touch community were out of work as well, right? No one could go to these installations,
No
so they
events
got really
happening.
into
Yeah.
like live streaming, right? Because they couldn't even work remotely. Like there's no way for them to uh, take a touch project and explained to a client, here's what we're trying to build, and work on it before they get there. Like almost everything happens during the installation phase, and it made me realize that wow, we are still stuck at the point of using PDFs to communicate experiences. And I asked myself the question: in 5, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, will we still be using PDFs to explain these experiences? I don't think so. So that's really where Foveate, the idea for Foveate was born, is how can we collaborate on a spatial experience remotely, asynchronously, with people anywhere in the world using all these fancy tools. I can model something in Rhino, parametrically design it in Grasshopper. I can map and program a media server using Touch Designer, but I have no way to kind of put all these puzzle pieces together. Like I can render it in Unreal, I can put it into a headset, but still I have putting that all into a slide deck for a client at the end of the day, right? It just makes no sense. We're such a us in the interactive immersive community, we're such a technically gifted community, but we didn't have a tool to take all of that knowledge and be able to explain that to a stakeholder who only knows how to use PowerPoint. So that's where Foveate really comes in. Is Foveate is that tool. It is kind of like Google Slides or Google Docs or something like that, but 3D at the core, and then you can incorporate all the other elements that you need to really communicate a project. So you can have your drawings in there, you can connect renders, you can have video textures, you can have sound. There's an interactive system. People can fly themselves around a scene. You can present to someone remotely, so it's not just screen sharing, and they can be inside of the 3D scene with you. So that's really where Foveate comes in, and I can just show people what this looks like. Maybe this is a good time to screen share.
Yeah, let's jump into it. Let's jump into the set. I think it's definitely apropos talking about it.
This is just our website, but basically I'll give people a brief rundown of kind of how Foveate works and the ideas behind it. But basically we realized, my co-founder Ian and I, who's actually one of my best friends in college from Michigan, we realized, people use all these different, creative apps to work on their projects. Like they use Rhino, they use Blender, they use Touch Designer, they use Unreal, but they don't really have a way to now share that with somebody else. So with Foveate, it's a way that we can invite team members to a collaborative 3D scene, upload your assets from all these different 3D and 2D apps, whether they're 3D models, videos, renders, audio files, point clouds, what have you, and then be able to share them with people and walk them through it in an easy and very intuitive way. And it just gives them an easy visual that they can understand. Kind of like if you were to build a model for a client, like a physical maquette, and they can pick it up, they can look at it, and they can really understand the space. So Foveate is kind of designed to take in all these different media and input and put them together in one easy package that you can share to any device just on a link. So it doesn't matter if someone's on a Mac or Android or Windows, they just get this link and they can open it right in the browser. So this is what Foveate looks like. This is your dashboard. So we designed it to be as easy and intuitive and as simple as possible. So you can just click on a project to open it. So I have one pre-opened here. This is more of an architectural scene, but basically it's a real-time interactive player. Someone can just press the spacebar and then just use it like a slide deck with these arrow keys. So we'll jump to the next moment here, and then Foveate takes care of all of the animations and stuff for you. So
I remember when sorry to just when Matthew was showing me Foveate, my first initial reaction was, oh, this must be pixel streamed, and then he's like, no, it's full full in-browser 3JS, and I was just like, oh, wow, we're so far along with what we can do in the web browser. It's crazy.
Yeah, Ian and I actually worked on a project for Rafa during COVID where we contracted him to help us make a web-based 3D piece. And that's really when Ian and I, got into 3JS, and we were like, oh, 3JS is getting pretty good, and it really got good because of NFTs. And
right.
kind
The
of
whole
3D
NFT
rendering
space,
around
for
that.
sure. I don't know if I've mentioned to
And
you, but
we,
my it's totally like a sidebar, just a anecdote. But my mother used to have a company. It still exists, but she used to have a company called I think I mentioned it to you, called
yes.
All Seated, and it was during COVID when they were always like in 3JS was always kind of like that was always the platform, but during COVID is when they really took it to like the next level of not just pre-visualization but also interactivity. And I remember when they were doing that, I was just like the whole time like no, just pixel stream, just pixel stream. And then like maybe 6 or 7 months into it, it was like, oh wait, actually this is much better to do. Like it just like
Yeah.
totally I don't know what it was, but I guess like the next version of it just like totally exploded into like ease of use and like just super web based and not like convoluted, which I thought was super cool.
That and the GLTF came out, which is kind of like one of the core 3D model
Right,
formats of Foveate, which
right.
gives you all this compression, real-time rendering capabilities
That's
and stuff
true.
like
The way
that.
that like almost a standardization of like a 3D file that's not like convoluted and makes a lot of sense for the browser must have made a huge difference for sure.
That definitely made a big difference. And I think also we were just kind of at that Moore's law cycle of hardware now getting, that 10x better, where
Right.
rendering a
Internet
real-time 3D
speeds getting
scene,
better.
bandwidth getting better.
Bandwidth getting
And I
better.
think
Yeah.
remote work really forced everybody to be like, wait, hold on. We got to figure out how we can make the web better. So that's kind
Thank
of what
God
we
for COVID,
realized.
huh?
One of the benefits, yeah, seriously, that came out of that era. But yeah, Foveate is just a way that you can make these camera points of view in space, and we realized that sharing 3D on a link isn't enough. You need to be able to explain it. So we invented a easy system called Moments, which is a combination of a camera point of view in space, text, and then interaction. So if I, for example, click on this button down here, this is where I can attach a render to this point of view in space. So a client can know, oh, this is where this render, and this was made with Blender cycles, was taken from. So now if I go to like the next point of view in space, I can explain to someone, oh, this is the bedroom. They can tell how we got there. And then we can also show the next render. So it becomes a way that you can take a PDF full of renders and be able to spatially locate them. These cameras are just here to kind of explain how Foveate works. And then you can even attach, this one is not responsive, but like drawings and PDFs to your scene as well. And then this is more for like the touch folks, but for immersive installations, right, being able to explain, oh, this is a video that's going to play on the scene is super important. I'm just going to mute this for my own benefit here. But with Foveate, you can drag and drop your 3D model from something like Blender or Cinema 4D, and then be able to attach a video material to the scene as well. So if I press play here, then we'll see now this video is playing across this wall and also playing on this wall over here. So it becomes a super easy way that now I can just share this on a link with people, so I can invite team members to view it and they can collaborate on them. I can set them to be editors or viewers. I can email invite people. I can make this public and be able to share this as a view-only link with people. I can embed this on a website as an iframe. So it's really taking kind of the previz work that I was doing at Rafa Studio and folding it into a workflow that really anybody who is creating spaces and experiences can utilize to communicate them better. And that could be for selling them, it could be for actually working on them, it could be for a post-installation digital twin that shows like the real-time status of an installation. There's a whole bunch of use cases. But yeah, with Foveate, the kind of interesting thing about it is this combination of 3D and 2D and text, and kind of putting them all together in a way that anybody can use. So, I just wanted to show you guys, kind of how easy this is. So I have prepared a little Blender scene here. So this just has a person kind of moving around in a scene.
Nice.
And this is supposed to be a video wall. And I've named this material video here so that someone can just export a GLTF. So we'll call this previz demo 2. We'll export this model. So that's done. And that's another benefit of using GLTF and not FBX is the export time is much, much faster. And then we'll just take this fresh scene here. So Foveate's ready to go. There's no real load time or shaders compiling, I love Unity and Unreal, but just opening one of those projects takes like a bajillion years. And now I can just drag and drop this GLB onto Foveate, and then it's going to instantly appear in our scene. We'll turn off this grid, go to the scene settings here. We have a whole library of HDRs that we can use. So let's turn this into like an architecture night HDR scenario. And then because we named that file video, we can now go in and pick, we could drag and drop a video that's just an MP4 onto this scene. So there's no like setup for a video playing. It's just you drag it in, it's here, you can play it. It's going to be that flat plane. Or in this case, I'm going to pick this GLB, and now it'll be mapped onto this GLB. We'll make our moment here. We'll call this visual cast, and then if I press play, now this video wall is playing, and this person is animating. So you can see in 30 seconds, we were able to make a fully shareable 3D scene that I can now make public and share with anybody on a link. Like, that's pretty good. I'll call this Alon's installation. So really we're hoping that folks in the touch designer community, they could be able to utilize a tool like this to be able to pre-visualize all of their installations better, be able to explain to a client exactly what they're trying to do. I was just speaking with Matthew Reagan, right? And one thing we want to do is make some tutorial content that can showcase exactly how something like this would work, how somebody could be able to be tracked in a space by like a camera or a Hokuyo sensor or something like that, and then have the content on the LED wall change. So that's really where Foveate shines, is in a use case like that.
Hell yeah. Sweet.
That's a very simple example, but Foveate has allowed me to make, how many projects? I have 13 pages of projects, and there's like 27 projects per page, so I've made, I don't know, like almost 300 scenes this way, because it's such a fast and easy way to visualize content. You can drag and drop things from any 3D app that people use, whether it's Cinema 4D, it's Blender, it's Touch Designer, it could be an FBX, a GLTF, whatever you want, a 30M for Rhino. It could be a construction model, a 3D scan, point cloud. So Foveate's really designed to do it all and make it super easy for people. Or should I have a better point cloud one?
Yeah, I was seeing that you guys are incorporating some Gaussian splats into that as well. Is that?
Oh yeah.
Is that getting more and more? Like, are people requesting that more and more?
Honestly, that's more our interest than people's requests, because I don't think that the public has quite caught up. That's a little bit too cutting edge for most people.
But I mean, it's just a great way to, visualize a space. It's like, this is a splat. Nice.
Yeah, this is a splat.
Nice.
And I love splats because I've done a ton of photogrammetry in my life, and I always get annoyed by kind of how difficult the process is, and for something shiny, something furry, something not conducive to photogrammetry, wiry, for example, like it's just impossible, and it's like it looks worse than if you just had never done the photogrammetry at all. So splats, they're just such an interesting
it's a hit or miss.
Format.
It's a hit or miss. I think with photogrammetry, it's like sometimes you can get a super detailed thing, and sometimes it's garbage. For me, photogrammetry is always like a good start of like what the scale is. Like, is the scale correct? But then again, it could also be totally off. Gaussian splats is just amazing. The only problem with Gaussian splats is that they're not geometry. but I think that that's kind of changing now. There's a lot of ways to convert it. And also, I mean, the nice thing about them is that because they're just points, they're kind of accessible in a lot of different softwares and workflows, which is pretty great.
Yeah, you can always just turn them into a point cloud. So that's
Yeah.
something cool about them. And there's, people like Polycam who are really innovating on how to go from splat to mesh. And that's kind of using the same technology as photogrammetry behind the scenes anyway,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. It's using CoolMap. But
Mm.
yeah, I like the splats because I'm like, you could get a point cloud out of this that is, just as useful as a point cloud in a different application. But with Foveate, kind of the idea is there should be access or visibility into a project by everyone. Like it's kind of crazy that we're the technologists on many of these projects, right? And only we have access to the 3D, but the clients or a manager or director, let's say, they don't know how to use the 3D application. Like
Right.
Rafa could never navigate Unreal.
Right.
But now that person can, and they can really understand how a 3D scene, or rather an experience, is supposed to feel. And they don't have to ask you to re-render the back of this
Right.
model.
Again and
Right?
again
They
and
can
again.
just
Yeah,
move the
yeah, yeah.
camera. So that really is going to save people a ton of time. And just give clarity onto the project with people. I think I give this example. Like whenever you watch a movie and some sort of heist or event is being planned, what do? They have a scene where they got a table or a sandbox. They're moving like little pieces around. They're like, that car or that Coke can, that's the car. This block, this brick, that's the bank, and we're gonna rob it. Or you see Star Wars and they have the holograms of the Death Star. It's like, okay, clearly people need a visual to be able to coordinate on something, and they haven't been able to do it up until now. They've only been able to use a PDF or like some sort of 2D form, but now we can give them that kind of sandbox experience anywhere they are, no matter what device they're on, without having to learn something new. Just like if you built a physical model and you give it to someone. That's really kind of like the superpower that we want to give everybody. Just visibility into a project, better decision making, better understanding.
Yeah, it's clear that that's kind of the goal with this. Show us a little bit more of what it can do, and maybe a more specific application for something. It was cool to see how
Sure.
easy it is to bring in something from Blender or from a 3D program. I spied Magic Box over there.
Can I show that one?
Sure, definitely.
Okay. We can show
Definitely.
that one. I'll show them this one first. So this is a concept visualization of a site in Kuwait. Oh, I have a lot of things open. But this is, the next sphere is supposed to be in Abu Dhabi, so this was kind of like visualizing something like that. But with Foveate, this is a photo scan of that Sheikh Jabbar Al Ahmad Cultural Center in Kuwait, and then added the sphere on top of that so people could kind of imagine it together. So with something like Foveate now, you can just be able to press play and then be able to sequence a bunch of video content and fly people through the scene, explain that this is a new immersive landmark with this text here, be able to show other video options. So, this is a way that people can show clients different flavors of content, or if they're trying to, visualize the next series of content, it's always a big part with installations. Like, let's say you're doing an executive briefing center, and you're like, well, what's the content going to look like next week? And they want to be able to see that. This is a very simple way that someone can be able to sequence all those different points of view, different videos. Someone could comment on it. So this is where, like, let's say a client is investigating your model and they're flying to this point of view, and they can create a moment. And there's a little profile picture down here and timestamp. This is where, let's say, your art director could say, we want organic video content here. And then they could link, let's say, to a YouTube video or a Vimeo link that has like a bamboo forest, for example, and they're like, this is the reference. So we want to make it like a super easy way that people can talk about every level and scale of project and not have to spend hours and hours rendering of complicated fly-through that's static.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an example of videos, and then we're going to show off Magic Box here, but
Let's
this is an
go.
example with animations. So Alon, he made this just for your viewers. He made this crazy animation of the Magic Box trucks opening.
Fast
so with
one.
Foveate, you can yeah, you can sequence animations and pick them in the file. So for example, if I go here and I pick the Magic Box model, you can see there's every animation track that was inside of this file now available to pick. So with moments, it's not just this text label here. You can pick all these things, which asset to be shown and appear, what animation to play at this moment, what video to play at this moment, if an image to appear in this label, a PDF to be attached, an audio file to play, an Apple USDZ AR model to be triggered. You can do all those things with the moment system. So it's supposed to be like slides of a interactive 3D presentation. That's what Moments is at its core.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was very clear that like there's a bunch of applications. I think one, we've spoken about this a few times, but one was to just have something to show what the transformation looks like, not in a video where the user can actually move around. Videos, you're kind of like stuck. And then also as a tool for sailing of like, hey, send us your content. We can put it on the Magic Box screens, and you can get like a pre-visualization of what it's actually going to look like. So for us, it was very interesting, and I'm very excited to take it to the next level with some of the conversations we've had. But yeah, please continue showing us some cool stuff.
That's exactly where we want people to be using Foveate and those kind of use cases, and we're excited to work with you guys too, because we want to hear. Well, what else do you guys want? What would change your life?
Everything.
Yeah, right. And stuff like Foveate. Rafa's work, for example, had so many moving parts. There were oftentimes robotic elements to pieces where something would physically move. So at Foveate, part of that is getting an animated asset, out of Maya or Max or Blender into Unreal, and then being able to trigger that. That's such a painstaking process. We want to make it so that someone can just drag and drop their model in, pick an animation to play. In this case, it's the idle, and then it just works. And the client can understand it. They can move around. They can see how it animates in space. You can talk about it. One thing that we really like, that I really wanted to add with Foveate, is this present option. So if I share this editor link with somebody, like if I send this to you or anybody who I want to be viewing the scene with, and they open this, I can press present, and then what this will do is it'll actually sync my camera with the client's camera, and it will smoothly interpolate wherever I'm looking and move their camera for them. So it's a way that we could talk about this. Yeah, without screen sharing. And that way there's no latency, there's no choppiness. You have a client who's, low bandwidth, they're traveling, they're out in, I don't know, Mallorca or something. You're in LA, and you don't have to worry about the video bandwidth being a problem. So that's one super feature that I'm really excited about. And then, because my background and a lot of work was done in Unreal and Unity, these have super nice post-processing pipelines, and it's been nice to see Touch kind of adopt some of that stuff, like the Bloom top. Yeah, and with Foveate, this is kind of more of a tech demo in a way. We really want to showcase that you can have super high-quality visuals.
Tell a story.
In the browser and not need to really worry about it. Like, this has volumetric dot rays, it has 8K HDRs, it has an animated helicopter asset with PBR materials. Like, it's got everything you need to tell a story. It's kind of like if Unity had a web version that was just really simple to use and had kind of the same look. But it's really inspired by Unity and Unreal, and how powerful those game engines are for conveying ideas in a visually intuitive way, but just without all the game engine stuff. Like, that's how we imagined it.
Right.
And then this scene is another kind of demo showcasing all the different kind of assets and files you can have. So this is Will Escott, CEO of Play Canvas. He sent me the scan of himself. That this is a 3D splat or a Gaussian splat. If I press play here, you'll see there's a video playing. There's this animated asset here. There's a point cloud over here. There's dynamic lighting. So like, for example, these lamp assets. Let me just pick this guy, Archimedes. This has a
Oh wow, look at that! I didn't know you could do that. That's cool.
Yeah, so if you have any asset that has a light attached to it coming out of Blender or Max or something, then you can, it's attached to that asset forever in Foveate, and you can just move it around and use it as needed.
That's
videos,
really awesome.
You can just drag and drop and be able to do what you want with them. So really just trying to make kind of the interoperability issue around 3D and experiences a lot easier. Someone should be able to upload any kind of 3D, 2D asset they want and see it instantly. Not have to like create a player for it, create a material, kind of do all the really unnecessary and tedious tasks that one normally has to do when setting that stuff up in any of these game engines or render engines or even touch to some extent. You don't have to worry about containers. It's just there and it works.
And it's in the browser, easily accessible.
Yeah, and you can just share it with anybody. So this is an animated example. So this is like a car scene, and this has animations and sound. You can't hear the sound, but this is more of an audio demo. It's trying to explain stuff about this electric vehicle. And then, Foveate has, I'll just go back to this one for a second, just like a whole host of post-processing features that, we want to make nice for people. So if I turn on, for example, this background, turn off the blur here, we'll jump to the next moment. This has a video material, and we can do all sorts of nice post-processing stuff, like turn on depth of field. Nobody thought this could run in WebGL, but it does amazingly. Let's do that. Make it a little bit more cinematic. This doesn't really need God rays, but we can turn them on. Some chromatic aberration. We'll make it a little noisy. Make it have some vignette. Oh, we're getting real cinematic now. Boost some saturation, turn down some contrast. Say we want to turn this into like an ACES workflow. Okay, now we're like really high contrast ACES style. We just want to make this kind of hybrid of a high-end PBR
3D render.
Yeah, 3D renderer, but shareable on a link and has all the benefits of a typical slide presentation. And of course, someone can also jump to first person and stuff like that.
I love the like you were saying, the ability to present. So you can like have a client just send them the link, and then you can actually walk them through the space. So you can give them like a little bit of this is what my intention is, this is what I'm trying to do, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's super powerful in the sales process, and the ability to kind of like what we were talking about before, being able to express yourself as a designer and as an artist to your client or even to your team.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks in the touch community are, such good artists, technologists, engineers, but oftentimes they can struggle with kind of the more business aspects of the industries that they're in. A lot of that has to do with selling and like how do you sell this work to a client. And it's interesting. I worked on hundreds of proposals, and at the end of the day, let's take let's see what's a good example here. Let's go with one of these SketchUp penthouse scenes. I have it. Oh, might be on the next page. At the end of the day, like let's say you're making a scene or you're making a project, right? And you have to include these drawings and renders and stuff like that. A drawing, a render, and a 3D model, they all mean something different to a client. So for example, where is this project? Oh, I'll just search it. Here we go. this is a pretty heavy scene, so this might take a second to load. But let's say you're giving someone a VR tour, right? Like, what is that VR tour doing for a client? That's immersing them in it, right? So that you're selling the feeling with that, right? Like how they're going to experience this thing. Let's say you add audio, right? That's emotion to video as well. Let's say we had a client who, he was really obsessed with cars, and he had a red Ferrari that he drove everywhere. And I remember for a project, we put in that car into the proposal because it was for this like large lodge that he was building, and he loved it. He loved seeing his car in there. It allowed him to see himself in that project. So let's say your client's really into sports, like putting a piece of sports content really helps in selling that experience, or in this case, this penthouse to that person. So I would say that's where like interactive visuals can really help. And now if we get into like, let's go back to this plan view here, and we have this PDF drawing, right? Like what does a PDF drawing, this is just because my screen is a weird aspect ratio, but like what does this PDF drawing really say to a client? Like if you ask someone how big 10 feet is, 1 foot, 6 inches, like they cannot tell you what that means.
I can't even tell you.
It's I can tell you because I'm an architect. I know exactly what that's like. But for 99% of people, they don't know what that means. So what does a PDF or like a drawing really mean to them? And it means that you have figured the shit out on your end. It's showing them that you have figured out the technical specifications for how this thing is going to fit into this space, right? That's really what a drawing does for people. And then if you attach a render, for example, like we have this like Enscape render here, what does this do for a client? This is giving them the prettiest version of this project, right? The idealized version. So that's allowing them to imagine it in kind of like the most beautiful way, with like really nice shadows and global illumination, right? That's really what a render does. It's like marketing. It's like, that's kind of like the sexy thing. But I think a lot of times where especially architects fail is thinking that that's enough. Thinking that, clients at the end of the day just want to see a pretty picture. I would say if that were true, then everybody would win projects. You know what I mean? Like people who could make the best images, they would just always win the project. And that's not necessarily true, because I think what really wins projects is a client being able to understand it and see themselves in it. And that's what lets them fall in love with it, right? Is they're like, I get it. I think for a lot of people in our industry, they'll give a presentation, they'll think, wow, like that was a great presentation. And then at the end, the client just says like, I don't get it. Like, I just don't get it, man. Like, can you explain that again? And, we've had so many instances, back when I was at Rafa's where that happened. If we couldn't give them the full, VR and Unreal tour, they just saw the renders and they were like, I don't understand like where this is going to be in this room. And we'd have to get on endless Zoom calls. Like we had this one project, I have it here. It's called Speaking Willow. This is a crazy custom tree that we made. Shout out to Carolina Record who programmed this one, but this has a bunch of Intel RealSense cameras. It has 400 of these speakers, and each of these speakers has recording of a different language. And as you walk underneath this tree, the camera tracks you and it plays the speaker and activates the light over your head. So as you walk, it'll start whispering, all these different languages to you. That's Rafa there, actually, right there. That's the architect engineer, Sean Kesey from UAP. And this is the Planet Word Museum where this is located, who contracted us to build this thing. But I remember Sean and he was in New York and I was in Montreal at the time, and we were trying to talk about a particular branch on this tree and why that wasn't going to work for the cabling, because this is all, Cat 6 or Cat 7 cable we had to fish through here. And at a certain point, we were trying to measure the diameter of this galvanized steel tubing and think like how many wires can fit in here. And we found out that if we had this one particular branch, then there wouldn't be enough room in the tube for that cable to be snaked through, and we had to fix it. But we literally spent 2 weeks going back and forth, sharing different Rhino files, trying to talk about that branch, or these two end branches and why that wouldn't work. And it made me realize like, oh man, I really wish we had a tool like Foveate at that time, where we could, just export that 3D model out of Rhino and then be able to share a link with someone and have the moment system where we could just have the camera point of view fix right on that model and be able to explain it. So this is actually a 3DM file out of Rhino. So this has the length of every cable in meters, or sorry, in centimeters written onto it. So this is using the 3DM file, which can have all that text dot and curve information. So now, this is a system where we could just go to this particular branch and say branch hole 64, we got to remove it because the cabling's too thick and it can't fit in. So this would have solved our entire problem in like 10 seconds instead of 2 weeks. We want to talk about the drainage system on the model, and then we could easily go in here and say like, hey, this is where the drainage outlets are for all the panels.
That's awesome.
This is just a basic white box model too.
It kind of ties into like what I think Matthew Reagan was trying to use the software for as well, where it's like being able to be like, okay, here is your server, here is the connection of the server, here is all the technical stuff, and then integrate his awesome Signals app into it so that you can actually get the data from, the real-time data from Signals, but visualize it in a 3D place, which I think is like, that's really super interesting way to incorporate these things together. This is a virtual production studio. I'm familiar with those.
This is Zero Space. This is one of their ICVFX stages.
Nice.
They're out here in Brooklyn, so they're friends. But basically, they just show this map on their website or on their emails to clients, right? And it's just like their basic map of what their space looks like. And it's really hard for clients to understand. Oops, let me just zoom in here. Really hard for clients to understand, what this space is actually like. So this is just a simple demo I made for them that has that map, and then I've gone ahead and just extruded some of the walls. But if I take someone on a tour here, now it's very easy for them to explain
the size and
the size of the stage, the different walls, exactly how a virtual production set works. Now we just zoom in. It's like, this is what the camera would see. They don't see anything else. They just see this view. And then someone can visualize the different panels inside of the scene, and then this is where they can show, oh, this is the backup house control, this is where the servers are behind these curtains, there's bathrooms and washrooms here on the left. This is Studio A, the loading bay door is only this big. So you can only like fit in, 2 skyjacks at a time, let's say. You can't fit in a truck or a car or something like that. So it becomes, hopefully a very simple and easy way that you can take even the most basic white box models and then be able to communicate them to anyone. So now they can just share this with anybody on a link. This could be embedded in a website. This could be, if someone fills out a customer inquiry form, this automatically gets sent to them via an email, and they can open it up and explore it, stuff like that.
So is there I'd love to shift a little bit into maybe like a more, pricing details, also like where you guys are as a company, what the next kind of like features are going to be, and what you guys are focusing on, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so with Foveate, we're really designed it to be accessible as possible. So that's why we made it a SaaS app with different tiers, and also just kind of works out because it's the browser. So basically an indie account comes with 1 seat, and that's $99 a month. There's a 20% discount if you do it yearly. So that's $950 a year. So if you compare that to like a Touch commercial license, it's basically, I think that's pretty similar. And then a Touch Pro license is like $2,200, so much cheaper than one of those. And then a team plan is $399 a month. So your cost, it comes with 5 users, so your cost per seat actually goes down. So basically we want companies to be able to have as many seats as they want and have the price per seat go down, because we realize that people don't really feel like they get value out of seat-based pricing necessarily, and we want to give everybody visibility into a project. So we want to make it affordable for like 20 people to be on a Foveate plan together, and then be able to all collaborate on a scene. And we really want Foveate to be kind of like this glue that connects all their different tools. So let's say, a lot of Touch folks use Cinema 4D, like Elbers, he loves Cinema 4D. He'll do all his UV mapping in there, send that model to Touch, then do his mapping, or video content creation in Touch. But then that's it, right? Like you can either screen record or do a movie file out of Touch and share that with the client. Or now you can just take that FBX model or GLTF from Cinema 4D, put that into Foveate, record your 10 different content options in Touch Designer, put all that into a Foveate scene, sequence them out, and be able to share that with a client and go through all your options, share that with your teammates, with our link feature in Moments. A lot of people use GitHub for their touch files when they collaborate, right? You can just put in the GitHub link there so people can grab the latest file, stuff like that. So that's really kind of how we envision the workflow for people.
Sweet.
And then kind of like on the topic of conversation with digital twins and kind of Matthew's use case with signals, how do you monitor an installation, right? A feature that we want to add next year is going to be an API so that people can programmatically create moments and stream in information data. So for example, when you create a moment, this URL here changes similar to Google Slides. So if I make a moment over here, you're going to see this URL change. So now if I go between moments, go between moments, that URL is changing with each moment. So now you can create these different, points of view that are linked to this URL. So it'd be great if, let's say,
Sorry, I missed that. You're saying the URL is changing based on what moment you're in?
Yes, exactly. So each moment has its own unique URL. So if I go to the next moment,
so like kind of like I can send somebody a YouTube video that jumps into like the part of that video or something.
Exactly. Or you share somebody a Google slide deck and you share them the exact slide that you're on.
Oh, I love that. That's cool.
But yeah, with the API, we could make it so that, say there's a media server over here. Sorry, this is empty, but pretend there's a media server here. We make a moment that's looking at a media server, and let's say you have 20 of them in the room. Then with the API, you can detect that media server is down, and it automatically moves to that moment. So let's say you're remotely monitoring an installation for a client, it could find out which computer is down and then give them a 3D walkthrough to exactly where that computer is and tell them, hey, it's this unit, and stream in data that takes in, Matthew's app tells you like the GPU, CPU utilization, the uptime for that computer, all of that data could be streamed in for this moment label. And then with moments, you can spatially locate them as well. So it could say, this is media server 2A, this is one of the nodes, and it has this data streaming in. It has this temperature of the GPU. It's been running for 23 hours. Its restart time is 6 a.m., stuff like that. So that's what the API will enable, and that's kind of like the next big kind of paradigm feature that we want to add next year. Of course, eventually we're going to add WebXR support so someone can jump into a headset and view a Foveate scene, immersively.
Yeah, that's like the next natural thing, right?
Yeah, we're just kind of waiting on the tech, the hardware to get better. We've used the Vision Pro, we've used the Quest 3, now the new Samsung headset's out, and we're just kind of like waiting for them to get their shit together, for lack of a better word, and have WebXR be a little bit more robust. Because, Foveate scenes, they can be pretty intense if you have a lot of videos going on, you have post-processing, and the hardware is not necessarily that optimized for it. For example, Meta headsets are still throttled, so we'll see where that goes. But that's kind of later 2025 features we're looking into. And then, of course, one of my most anticipated features is WebGPU, where once Safari gets WebGPU, then we can finally move all Foveate to be WebGPU, and everything should just play much faster, look better. We can add more features like lens flares and atmospheric scattering, stuff like that. All kind of viz features that people like.
You said that's in Safari specifically.
Yeah. So WebGPU is WebGPU. There's WebGL, and that works on all browsers. Right. WebGPU is the next iteration of WebGL that can fully utilize all of the device's hardware. Right now, WebGL is basically just single-threaded, for lack of a better term, and it can only access part of someone's GPU. WebGPU is what WebGL will be moved to, and WebGPU will allow the browser to access all of the hardware performance in a device. So it can use all the GPU, or mostly, much more of the GPU, much more of the CPU. But it requires that every browser, so Safari, Firefox, Chrome, Edge, and their backends, Chromium, Gecko, and I forgot what Safari's is called. WebKit. It requires all of them to basically update their backend to WebGPU. So we're just waiting for Safari to do that, and once that happens, then Foveate scenes should be even better, and hopefully will look more like the highest end Unity project or like Enscape or something like that.
Sick. Super sick. Yeah, is there anything else that you wanted to share with us about this?
Yeah, I think that's mostly it for the top of my head, but I will say that Foveate does have a 14-day free trial. So for those listeners interested, it's free to sign up. You just click this button here, put in your email. You're welcome to use it for whatever you'd like. And if you guys ever want a demo from me, you can press the schedule demo button. And if there's requests for features, you can either hit us up at team@foveate.com. That's our email. Or we do have a Discord that you can come to from our website as well. I think it's at the bottom of this page. Join our Discord. And yeah, we'd love to hear from the community. What are some other things that you would like? There's been a lot of features in here and workflows really based upon my experience using Touch and using Touch with other kind of CAD and 3D modeling and visualization apps. But, always welcome to hear from the community kind of your ideas and where you would like things to go.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing with us a little bit of a behind the scenes or a little bit of a current Foveate state, I guess, for lack of a better word. It's super cool. Like I mentioned, we are, I'm trying to push to integrate it into our sales tool, into our just kind of pre-visualization tool. Obviously, I can only make suggestions, but I think that it's pretty clear to my CEO how powerful it can be. We just have to figure out how to actually integrate it. But yeah, I mean, it's the 14-day free trial is awesome. I really recommend anybody to kind of go and take a look at it, look at all the scenes that are already available, and Kitae is super helpful and there to kind of help you kind of integrate your project. So yeah, I mean, if you have something that needs to use this, then go check it out. So we're at our second portion now. And the first thing I would want to talk about is you mentioned at the get-go sci-fi and its impression and inspiration on you. Give us a little bit of a rundown into what's your favorite sci-fi, how does it influence you in your life, and maybe we can just kind of just talk about that a little bit, because I also love sci-fi. I'm a huge Asimov fan. My background on my computer when I was like a 10-year-old, when I was a kid, was a picture of him like sitting in a chair. That was my background. Yeah, I was a huge,
I also
huge
liked Asimov, yeah. I read all of his books growing up. I forget. I think maybe it was my dad who just had a collection at my grandma's house. And
nice.
I would just be like, oh, what's this? And then pick it up. I'm like, oh, this is
what
good.
Do your parents do, just out of interest?
My dad, right now, is cybersecurity or risk specialist.
Oh, cool.
But before that, he was in risk management and analysis, software. Back when he was young, he worked at a bunch of different startups doing software and kind of crazy computers. I remember he told me this one project he worked on that was for the military, that was a computer that was impervious to radio signal hacking. And it was literally just a lead cube.
A lead cube?
The computer was in. And so nothing could get the frequencies from it and be able to reverse engineer.
How would it get frequencies out? it wouldn't.
I think there's some crazy cables.
Right.
Just some sort of crazy shielded cables.
That's crazy.
And then before that, he was really into sculpture, and he wanted to be a sculptor.
Cool. Awesome,
So I think that's kind of where my art side comes from a little bit, art and tech. And then my mother, growing up, was actually a model. She was one of the first Asian models in Tennessee.
Cool.
They both immigrated to the U.S. when they were teenagers, and then
They met. You're Korean. You mentioned to me. Did they meet in Korea or they met here?
No, they hilariously met on a blind date that my mom's sister had set up. And my mom was in Tennessee, pursuing her career, and then my dad was in Boston pursuing his career. And then I forget how my mom's sister knew that. I think it was like a friend of a friend, or like my aunt's boyfriend's friend went to school with my dad, and they're like, oh, maybe they should just meet up. And she was visiting in Boston, so they were like went on a blind date and hit it off.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So was your mom like a supermodel? Like was she modeling?
No. No, more like there used to be this company called Kastner Knott in Tennessee. So that was like a large department store in the South.
Gotcha.
So she was one of the models there.
Gotcha.
And then,
did you do that when you were a kid as well, or was that kind of just before?
Yeah, when I was a kid too. And then like commercials and TV and ads and
that's so cool.
Stock images. You might see her in some stock photography. Yeah. Or like National Geographic like ads or something. There's like her and my brother in an aquarium looking at a fish tank.
No way.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So my brother's an actor, so I think that's how he became an actor. Is he had such a fun experience on set because he would often come with her to be like mother and son.
Is he in LA?
Combo.
Your brother?
Yeah, he was in LA, and now he's actually in a touring production of Life of Pi, going around the country.
Oh, cool.
So if you are into theater,
like
go to Life of Pi.
Theater. Like the theater production.
Yeah, it's a theater interpretation of the movie. It's crazy. Cool. It's giant puppets and
sounds super
all
cool.
sorts of big production effects.
Awesome.
It's really cool. So, recommend folks in the touch community. You will like it.
Hell yeah. Sorry, we got on a tangent there, but yeah, sci-fi and its kind of implementation in your life and inspiration in your life.
Yeah, I love the Star Wars movies growing up. And I loved Ralph McQuarrie, and really Star Wars introduced me to concept art. And I really got into Ralph McQuarrie and Sid Mead, and that's really like where a lot of my drawings, personal drawings, were of, like stuff like that, vehicles, worlds. I loved how they depicted just like this whole universe, and it became the basis for something else, like Giger or like the Matrix, stuff like that. Blade Runner, also love Blade Runner.
Nice.
Was never a huge Star Trek fan. Sorry, guys, if anyone's a huge Star Trek fan. I don't know, just never did it for me. I think
you don't have to apologize.
Yeah. I think it's because I just don't like anything campy. Like,
gotcha.
Campy is it's not for me.
It's
I like
not
very
true sci-fi, huh?
No, I just like some things that are very are much more aesthetic because it's a whole different world, or very detailed, very immersive. I keep saying this word, but like.
So you love Dune,
something like Dune.
I would imagine.
Yeah,
there you go.
They got everything in there. They thought of everything.
Yeah.
Everything was like of that world. The Matrix as well. So detail
Matrix.
oriented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Matrix is kind of like a ripoff of Paprika. Have you seen that anime, the Paprika
Paprika,
movie?
yeah.
Paprika.
Satoshi Kon, he's great.
Yeah. Nice.
Also, a lot of like video games. Metal Gear Solid was a huge impression on me growing up. A lot of the aesthetics and kind of like sci-fi nature of that. Like they're kind of like this modern, but like hyper modern / just really Japanese. I also think being Asian and growing up in the Asian community and being exposed to a lot of like Korean, Japanese, Chinese content, you just see stuff over there that is science fiction. Like, this is so simple, but in Korea, like we've had video doorbells for like 20 years. You know
Forever.
Like,
that's so funny.
Yeah. And
you're
now
like,
that like Ring is a thing.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I'm
so
like,
funny.
dude, this has been around forever. Like, why are people so
That's
crazy about
so
this?
Funny.
Or even like,
is there
Korea,
Korean anime?
Oh yeah, it's called manhwa, which is like
Okay.
that's Korean manga.
Okay.
But honestly, like the techniques are the same.
Yeah.
Um, it's more just their own flavor of it.
Interesting.
Um, but I think both Korea and Japan, this is now venturing to like culture and like socioeconomic stuff. But like I think Korea and Japan both realize they are tiny Asian countries with not that much physical resource back in
Mm-hmm.
like the 80s, and they're like, we need to figure out a way that we can survive and make money that isn't based upon what we physically have to offer. And both of them realize like, oh, we have such rich cultures, we should develop them. And manga and anime from Japan became one of their biggest exports, and then
For
Korea,
sure.
like K dramas and
K-pop bands, I
K-pop and
guess. Yeah.
esports, like those became really big because they were
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, if we invest in the internet, we can kind of take over remotely.
Mm-hmm.
So I think,
Mm-hmm.
my mom has always been a super proud Korean woman, and that's the stuff that she loves talking about, which is kind of funny for someone who was like a model.
Nice.
I'm like, Mom, what do you know about like esports and streaming and
Right,
and
right,
like
right.
cultural,
K-pop
like,
bands.
yeah,
That's funny.
democratization and like cultural dominance throughout the world?
Do
And
you
she's
have
like,
a lot of family there?
I don't have a ton. I do have a couple aunts and uncles there still, and I do have a couple some friends as well. But I don't have a ton of
Nice.
family there anymore, unfortunately. Most of them are in the U.S.
And you speak Korean?
I speak some Korean, not the
Mm.
greather, but
Mm.
that's
You need
something
to
I'm working on.
languages you need to practice. Excuse me, if you don't
Yeah.
practice it.
Whenever
If
I
my
go
wife
there,
didn't
it's
speak Hebrew,
so much better.
I would lose my Hebrew in a second. Because it's just if you
Mm.
don't speak the language, you just don't. It just goes away. You just don't. Your brain makes room for other things, and it's like yeah. I mean, it's one of those things.
Yeah, I loved being over there. I was actually there for like a month or two right before
Nice.
COVID. It was like December 2019 to January 2020. And that's back when it was called coronavirus. And my aunt was like, hey,
Coronavirus.
there's this thing called coronavirus. And I was like, whatever, Emo. Like, I'm gonna go hang out with my friends. Because I was staying with her in Korea. And then,
Little did you
I'd
know
go
that it
hang
would
out with
become
my
a
friends.
sci-fi movie.
Yeah, my own sci-fi movie. Except it was a much more boring dystopia than like sci-fi usually entails.
Yeah,
You
that's
know?
true. That's true. Yeah, there was no
Blade
like
Runner sold me
fun
something totally
zombies or like robots or anything. It was just like the dystopia is just draconian laws and being stuck inside your house and being forced to do all
Yeah.
these weird shit that nobody wants to do. Yeah,
And like
for
Zoom,
sure.
endless Zoom calls.
And the Zoom
I
call
really
that
thought
that
there'd
was
be
like the
more.
dystopia,
Yeah.
right? Like everything's
Yeah.
moving to like NFTs are blowing up and all this thing is streaming and everything. You're like, is this really the future now? Is this really the
Yeah.
future? It's like, oh fuck. Oh my god.
Oh, I guess it's the metaverse.
Totally. I went to Goa like pretty much like very at the beginning of COVID, and it was like no COVID is happening there. It was like no restrictions, no nothing, and it was just like okay, it kind of gave me like an insight of like maybe all these Western countries are kind of like overreacting a bit and taking advantage of this global pandemic, with like very little information. And I don't know. It was just like such a weird time, especially back then. Like nobody really knew what was going on. And like in retrospect, now that we have all that information and kind of like post-COVID analysis of what happened, it's like, a little bit suspicious here. All these new laws and
It's
aspects
because I was in Montreal and the lockdowns there were super strict. Like you literally
Yeah.
were not allowed to leave your house unless it was for food or to go to the pharmacy. Like literally everything was closed. Every restaurant, like they were really strict.
well,
And
Canada
part of that,
love to be draconian.
it was so
and,
strange, honestly, because you would think of Canada being very liberal. Montreal's a super liberal place, but
what
they
happens
did
when you
that.
get super liberal? You get to be,
Well, I don't know, because in Korea, for example, Korea is not as liberal as Canada or the U.S., I would say,
Mhm.
but yet there
Mhm.
was no lockdowns, there was no restriction of movement in that way. So I think that was kind of like a funny reversal,
Dichotomy
but it
of
was
seeing both,
interesting, yeah, because I was stuck inside all the time. We had a lot of time, Ian and I, 'cause we were noodling the idea for Foveate back then. We had a lot of time to think about it and, work on remote 3D projects together and be like, well, how would we want to work together? How would we pre-visualize this installation? How would we develop this technology? Like, what would we want? So much of Foveate's development has been, we joke, like vibes based, where we're just like, would that be sick? Like to add this feature, like would that really help us out? Yeah, I think that'd be good. Like it wasn't something that somebody asked for. Like the present feature, that's something where I was like, screen sharing is so bad. Like we can't be a 3D web app and
that you have to
just have people screen share it. It makes no sense. So that's really where that presents feature and real-time syncing came from.
So this is a good segue, actually. What is it, are you guys a startup? Are you funded? Are you looking for funding? What has it been
all
like
bootstrap,
being... all bootstrap. What has it been like in the startup, being a startup? That's like totally a 180 of an artist. Being an entrepreneur is like a totally different experience. Like, there's some similarities, I guess, but like, what has it been like for you to be in that space? And are you guys looking for funding? Are you trying to get bought out? Like, what is the trajectory? Obviously, whatever share what you can.
Yeah, no, we don't want to get bought out, at least not anytime soon. We feel like we're just getting started. Like I mentioned, WebGPU is coming, and I was saying to Ian the other day, I was like, dude, if anybody even tried to acquire us before WebGPU comes out, like it would be so stupid because we're going to be able to like double the rendering capability and performance and features of Foveate. And once we have WebXR2, it's going to be like the whole shebang there. But we are both artists, engineers, kind of like scrappy dudes. From the get-go, like that's always been our background and how we've worked even in college, when we were like doing DJ VJ sets together. So we're no strangers to getting shit done, quickly, easily, not needing like a giant team. And we've honestly just haven't needed to raise money up until this point. We fully launched without that. It's not something that we're really like looking to do anytime soon.
It's a totally time suck experience, right? Going to search for money. It's like a totally different experience.
That I really hate the idea that some investor who knows nothing about our industry is going to change the product and make demands and be like, you got to add AI into this, because that's what everybody else is doing. But for us, we have such like a more clear idea of what this product is supposed to be and how it can help folks like us that we're like, why would we add AI unless it was so specifically for something that would, meet the needs of creative professionals, technologists, engineers, architects, designers. Like it has to help them. If it doesn't do that, what a waste of time and money.
Yeah, well, that's what they want. It's just a buzzword at this point. So let me ask you, I guess a two-part question, and feel free not to answer or take it where you want, but how many, like, are you guys supporting yourselves from the active users? Like, how many active users do you have, and do you moonlight as well, like on a second job? Like, do you have savings? Like, how are you bootstrapping your time working for one company?
No, it's a great question. So for us, actually prior to Foveate, we had our own little creative studio called Third Axis.
You and your partner?
And yeah, me and Ian. And
that's right, Ian.
That's where we would do a lot of kind of like 3D AR VR projects for hire and different services for like e-commerce or spatial presentations or creating content for like someone's AR startup or app or game or something like that. Creating visualizations for architects. So that's actually called Foveate Labs now. So Third Axis became that, and that's basically services that we do for people. So let's say somebody wants like a custom sales configurator, like a 3D configurator for, for some sort of product. Yeah. Well, in their case, like let's say a motorcycle, right? They want to be able to switch the tires on the motorcycle and have a customer be able to come to the site and change that stuff. That's something where we would take our 3D skills and Foveate's tech and be able to deliver that for them on a contract basis. So, that's kind of the work that we've done for people to fund Foveate, because we've really tried to keep this as bootstrapped as possible so that we don't have to take investor money and then have to be influenced by potentially someone else's bad ideas. So that's kind of the services aspect. And my background was in architecture. So, for folks in that community, a lot of it is visualization. So people want some sexy renders and a 3D walkthrough using Foveate, then we can make that for them. They want us to help them bid on a project, right? And they need a visualization proposal, kind of like 3D project management partner. So let's say somebody is pitching like executive briefing center, to a huge company like Verizon or something, and they might be really good at the touch stuff, and they got that down pat, and they have no problem. But where they might need help is they're like, oh, we could really use some help visualizing this stuff, creating the 3D content, building the Foveate presentation, walking the client through what this is going to look like, feel like, how it's going to be cabled. Because my experience, like I said before, I've worked on over 100 proposals in my life, and that is kind of the core at every studio or agency or firm's business, right? It's just how many quality proposals can they put out, and how can they up their conversion ratio. So that's really where we kind of shine and can kind of help people in that respect. And then for certain other companies, it might be kind of other use cases where they're like, oh, we just would love an architect to model something that would fit in this space, kind of like help us design this event or installation. Or let's say for some companies, they want like a virtual tour of their space or product. So for example, like this performance center in New Haven we're talking to, they want to be able to have a virtual tour that anybody can scan a QR code or get a link to, and basically replace the tour system they have now, which is just a series of images on their website. So smart. They're like, let's just replace our 3D.
How are people hearing about
slideshow.
You? How are people hearing about you? SEO?
Honestly,
or is it...
we haven't like marketed too much. We've been kind of like in a quasi stealth for the past year and a half, and we've only really come out in the last like 4 months. With working with people like Matthew Reagan, but then also working with more AEC partners, like because we coordinate with or work with all the different 3D apps, we've been able to go to people like SketchUp, Rhino, Unreal, get access to their software, build tutorials that show how to go from their software into Foveate, use that to make a immersive presentation. Yeah.
Nice.
So we haven't actually pushed we haven't pushed on that too hard, but that's been a really interesting way to co-market with people who are more established, and then show their user base, hey, here's a superpower that you can have using Foveate that you can't, that you couldn't do previously, and you don't even have to learn anything, right?
Right.
So
that's the pull.
Exactly. And then with SketchUp, we've been working with them speaking with them for a while, like 6 to 8 months, and then about 4 months ago they asked us to come to their accelerator program, which is called the 0 to 60 challenge.
That's awesome.
So then they got us to build a extension for SketchUp. So now with the SketchUp Foveate extension, anybody in SketchUp using this extension can basically model in SketchUp, create these different camera points of view in their SketchUp scene in which they can annotate, they can create video materials in SketchUp, and then export that to Foveate, upload that model,
directly.
And have directly just from SketchUp, a one-click export that puts that scene onto a Foveate link shareable with a client, and it's updatable. So if they update their model in SketchUp, they just press re-export, and then it uploads and overwrites the model in Foveate. They can invite somebody who's using 3ds Max. That person can add their animated assets. They can invite someone from Touch Designer. We know a lot of people in event worlds, they love SketchUp. If you look at like fashion shows, for example, a lot of those are honestly just SketchUp. But they need to be able to visualize, the LED wall, the projectors, the lights, all that stuff. Models walking down the runway, the camera points of view. So now with Foveate and SketchUp together, they can do all of that. They don't need another tool. They don't need to take a whole bunch of renders and screen caps. It's awesome. Just ready to go.
That's awesome. Is your day-to-day like more CEO type stuff? Are you doing more like client stuff? And your partner is more like the coding aspect?
Oh, Ian does a lot of the kind of CEO and coding stuff together.
Gotcha.
And then I'm technically the CDO, Chief Design Officer. And my
Gotcha.
background, since it is an AEC and experiential, I'm the one who's actually talking to a lot of these clients, doing like
Mm-hmm.
customer success, finding out their use case, doing kind of these conversations that I would have, like that I had with you and Brian,
Mm-hmm.
um, giving demos and kind of helping people understand what the product is, how they could use it, what problems that we're solving for them. So that's kind of how we split up a lot of the tasks. Yeah.
Gotcha. Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, no, it's great. It's been super interesting, like you were mentioned before. Being an artist designer and then moving towards a more entrepreneurial role
Mm-hmm.
is definitely has its challenges, but honestly, it's something that I've always wanted to do. And
Nice.
this is just for the folks who are thinking about going to business school. But I'm just like, there's nothing that's going to prepare you in business school, like just jumping in and doing it. So if you
Yeah.
want to try it out, like you just got to do it and get your feet
Yeah. Yeah.
wet.
Yeah. For
There's
sure.
no book, yeah, there's no course that is going to prepare you for all the challenges that you will face. But it is very rewarding.
Yeah. I mean, creating a tool for designers and artists, as a designer and artists, and you're on the other side of that, must be very, unique and interesting for you. Like, kind of like, obviously you have chief of design hat on, but you're also like, kind of ushering in designers to use a tool for designers, made by designers. It's a very interesting kind of not Venn diagram, but like the triangle kind of thing of things
Hmm.
being together. Um, are there any kind of like tips or tidbits that you've picked up along the way that kind of help you or focus you in a way to kind of be able to put on this hat?
Yeah, I think, when it comes to talking about this product with people, you kind of have to gear towards who you're speaking to. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, the technologist, designer, developer using the product, I have shared their lived experience, you know, working on these installations and being there in that process of, trying to explain it, design, develop it, produce it, maintain it, document it. So I can speak to like every single pain point in that way very um, organically with these people. Because, I have the work to prove it. Like I've been there, I've been in their shoes and I know the pain. Uh, and then when I talk to, like, say, someone more in the kind of C-suite or management level, right, they don't really know any of that. So you can't use those pain points and language to them. You really have to speak to things like ROI and time efficiency, time saved, how one employee can do this so easy an intern
Mm-hmm.
can do it. So I think that's an
Mm-hmm.
interesting change where, when I was doing proposals, so much of it is about selling the vision for an artwork and inspiring others and getting them interested in the concept. Or, with services, a lot of it is kind of like, sometimes massaging a client's ego, sometimes like um, playing into their tastes and preferences. But then, on a business level, when you're talking with some of these people, you really have to explain to them, like, what are they going to get out of this? Like, how many flights are they going to save? Site visits, how much budget is going to be saved upfront by doing really good previous work, where most of the costs of our project come from our the previous step, and all the mistakes that happen on site are because the previs wasn't done well enough. Like being to talk about that um, with the client. So I would say that is an interesting challenge that I've had to overcome and kind of learn about. Is you can't speak to different all these different people the same way and give them the same spiel. Like it really has to be tailored to who they are, what they understand,
Yeah.
what the problems are from their point of view, and that has been, kind of a unique thing that nobody really tells you about. Let's say, like, because if you're, for example, an architect, most architects, and I'm sure touch devs as well, um, they think to themselves, "Oh, we're going to stand out by having better work and doing more creative work, maybe doing our own side projects, stuff like that." And that's all fine and good, but it's interesting because that is the same strategy that everybody in those shoes has. Like everybody says the same thing. They're like, we're just gonna have our own style and um, just do the most creative work, and the client will pick us because our work is the best. And that's tough to do. And I think we've seen a lot of people have a hard time with that methodology, whereas if you can position yourself more uniquely, it actually allows you to do better and be the top choice in something. So for example, when we first started Foveate, we really opened up the net to every industry. We're like, hey, games, fashion, engineering, products, e-commerce, marketing, we want you guys to all use Foveate as well. And I had so many conversations with these people trying to show them Foveate, and I realized at a certain point, like they just didn't get it. And even if they use 3D, they all do in some way, which is why we were talking to them. Maybe we didn't understand their domain well enough and their needs to make the right product for them. For example, fashion is all about materials. So if Foveate doesn't render materials at like the highest definition possible in the most realistic way,
cloth simulations and whatnot.
Cloth simulation, like it doesn't matter to them. Like they're going to use Clo, Marvelous Designer, and render out a video and render out an image, do a Corona image, do a whole bunch of Photoshop, and like that's what matters to them. So I think being able to sit down and look back at our own strengths and say, hey, we've and I, we've worked on have a combined decades worth of experience working on all these installations, from the biggest corporations like AT&T to like little museums and art fairs and stuff like that. Like we've seen every stage of that world: experiential events, interactive, immersive, architecture, permanent, touring, temporary, pavilions. Like we've done all that. Like that's what we know. Positioning ourselves just in that bracket has been super beneficial. And it was a tough lesson, but one that, it seems scary at first because you're like, oh, we're going to limit ourselves to this potentially small pool. But then you kind of realize, oh, by doing that, it's actually freeing us by, giving us a more focused group of people who actually need the solution you're providing.
Right. They're going to be better clients and, happier.
And you can speak to them easier. Yeah. And you can build the features that really they care about more.
Benefits
them. So like a fashion, like a fashion person doesn't really care that we have a great post-processing stack and a present feature. Right. Like that doesn't matter to them. Certain things do really matter to them that we have, like the fact that it works on every device because they present on smart TVs and conference rooms a lot. Right. It works on an iPad because iPads are all color calibrated. So that stuff is really important to them. But we still have to add like 5 more features to make it worth it for them.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get there. I'm sure that running, maybe not yet, but running an Alembic in a web browser is probably possible at this point. And then it's just like that's the workflow, anyways. When they're going to Unreal, they're not using Unreal cloth physics. They're rendering out from Marvelous an Alembic that has all the physics in
Houdini,
it. Houdini or whatever. Yeah, it's like there's no. Even the game engines, they definitely have cloth physics and stuff like that, but it's more for a game. It's not for the high fidelity that they need. Although there is some tools out there. I did a virtual mirror. It was a totally nightmare and a client, and it actually ended up being scrapped. But we did a virtual mirror where the person would look at themselves in front of a TV, and we did like an AR augmented cloth simulation over them, and it would fit them and everything, and like moved with them and everything. It was pretty cool. There was this plugin called Tri-Mirror, I think it was called. What is it called? It's like a cloth sim that's not Unreal. This built-in chaos thing. It was like it was cool. Third party called plugin. They changed their name. UDraper. That's what it's called.
That sounds familiar.
And it was cool. Like it has similarities to like Marvelous Designer and like what you can do there, and it kind of had pretty realistic a simulation and very affordable. Like all the ticked all the boxes kind of thing. but yeah, I mean, the client was like, once we showed it to them and we're like, look how cool this is, you know, the user can come in and we like take a scan of their body to get the right body type so that it fits them, and look how dynamic it is. They're like, it's not real enough, it's not good enough looking, and we're like, what are you expecting here? You know, this is like you know, we're not making a product, we're just making a installation for like a 1 day, you know, fashion show. Like, what do you? They were expecting like some AAA, you know, video game quality, like post rendered thing, and we're like, that doesn't exist, you know, like, and if it does, it's impossible, and if it is possible, you're gonna need millions of dollars to make R&D to make a product, you know. So it was like, you're not paying us a tenth of that,
nearly
you know,
enough.
like not even close to that, you know. We went above and beyond, so it kind of like got scrapped before it actually got finished. But the proof of concept was super cool, you know. It was like we did like mesh morphs to like be able to dial in the person's body, you know, and like just from a picture we could like dial in their like thickness of their arms, thickness of their waist and everything, and then the claw simulation would kind of be wrapped on that fake skeleton of them, and it moved around, you know. And we did like masking so that there was like, you could be inside the thing. It was, I was very impressed by what we managed to do in this short amount of time, but they weren't. So, you know, somebody lost a lot of money. I got paid. I was fine with it. I did what I was supposed to do, you know. The expectations wasn't sold to the client properly. That's always the thing, you know. It's like, when you come in as an artist, if the art director or the, you know, the producer doesn't sell the thing properly, you're like fucked, because like, it doesn't matter what you do, they're never going to be happy. And you could do like the best job and like do exactly what you were hired to do, but it will never happen because they were sold something that was like totally not a realistic thing.
Honestly, that's one of the reasons why I prefer doing previzes and like even proposals, concepts in real time, because that kind of sets the expectation. Whereas
100%,
I've seen so many architecture firms, especially, create these crazy ArcViz renderings with like, you know, so much path trace with V-Ray and Corona, and then like so much Photoshop, and at the end of the day, you're like, these people sold something that is impossible. It is not real. Nothing is this bright. Like, I remember this one people, they did like a LED Archimedia installation on this building, right? And they made it shine super bright during daytime in the photo, in the CGI.
Not gonna happen.
Like, hey, I don't even know what lights you're thinking of, but nothing can compete with the sun. Like, it's impossible.
It happens in virtual production all the time when they're selling a virtual production shoot, and they're like, first of all, they're using like The Mandalorian as like an example, where The Mandalorian, everything was rotoscoped and re-rendered in, you know, in not in Octane, in like, you know, in like Corona, in like, you know, high-end fucking, you know, ILM renderers, not even Corona, like whatever. And they're like, oh yeah, it's gonna look photoreal, and then they're like showing, you know, from Unreal, like offline renders of like camera movements, and it's like, no, don't do that. Like, they're gonna expect that to run in real time, and it's like, that's not what it is, you know. You can definitely get it to look real, you can definitely get it to look good, but you're gonna have to like play with depth of field, you're gonna have to play with angles, you're gonna have to play with like, the best way to fake it is have physical objects in the scene that your eye, the user's eye, is drawn to, and the background is just a background, you know. And the parallax kind of fakes that depth and like real-time thing, but your eyes are drawn to the physical pieces of the set,
real thing,
and it's the real thing, and totally. And then it's like, they don't get that, or they sell it as like, no, just, you know, we'll make it look good, and it just never ends up doing that. And it's a shame, and it's something that like I've really spent a lot of time trying to educate like potential clients and potential like people that hire me, like a producer that hires me, of like expectation, shoot low, you know, don't fake the renders, like render from in camera, render from, you know, from Unreal proper, like screen capture what you're seeing in your viewport, because then it's like, maybe this isn't the right choice for them, maybe we need to do video plates, maybe we need to do, you know, a different approach. And it's always better, I feel, and you probably agree. Like, it's always better to lose the job than it is to get the job, have somebody spend a ton of money, and then be really upset, because you're going to be the person who wasted their money, and they're never going to hire you. Maybe they're going to badly talk about you. And let's say, like, even, more esoterically, they're never going to want to use the technology that you love and you're trying to champion again, because they're going to be like, virtual production sucks. It doesn't work well. Or, whatever, this architecture firm.
We burned $1 million on this.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the story that they tell forever. And then, like, nobody's going to want to adopt the technology that you're championing because of that one bad experience. So it's like, you might lose money, you might lose the client, but you're not burning a bridge. You're not ruining it for everybody else. And I think that's that's a whatever. That's like, kind of like a capitalism, profit over actual, like, profit over utility, or profit over like actual product, is like kind of a poison in our industry, visual arts, and just, in general, kind of like the visual world, especially now with AI and this kind of like quote unquote, like, I don't know if you've seen this Coca-Cola commercial that was released by AI.
Oh, I heard about it. Yeah, but I didn't watch it because I was just...
It's garbage, and it's like,
interested. Yeah,
it's
that's
like
what I heard.
90.
And I was like, I don't need to watch this.
99% of people are not going to know what it is, right? Even though they kind of made a point to say that it's AI at the end, which I thought was pretty cool. But it's like, I can guarantee you that commercial cost a shit ton of money, because they had to go through the process again and again and again, and they probably had to art direct the thing so difficult. They had to get some enterprise, thing with wherever they made it on Sora, wherever they made it, they had to get some enterprise deal with them, hire all these people, and it's like, at the end of the day, it just didn't look good at all. And it's like, what's the point of this, right? And it's just, I mean, to me, it was just like kind of like a really dumb use case of AI. And, hate or love AI, there's good use cases for it. It's kind of like, I had this conversation a few weeks ago, but it's like kind of like ChatGPT is kind of ruining LLMs for everybody with all these massive promises of features. And they're like, bar of entry is so high in terms of cost, in terms of use, that it's like, this is not what the actual thing should be, And it's like, you're just kind of making it look bad, and you're going to get all this investment, and then it's going to be thrown on the floor, and no promises are going to be filled. And then people are going to be like, this technology's shit. Let's just like put it aside and not like actually go, the full thing with it. And it's such a shame.
Yeah, no, totally. I feel like there are so many tech hype things that promise the moon and just ultimately never deliver. And I feel the way about VR, honestly, where
totally VR is such a good example of that.
VR is probably the best example in recent memory of something that was like,
or the metaverse,
supposed
right?
to be game changing. Yeah.
I
mean, I think the metaverse is really what killed it, to be honest. Like a VR, it should have just stayed AR VR. It should have said, hey, here are these technologies, and they're going to be the way that we, view spaces, that we do real estate tours, like you find your next apartment.
Right.
Or like for AR, it's like people doing surgeries where they can like, a chef can have 10 timers above every single thing in their space, or like translate languages. There's so many use cases for that stuff. But then like the metaverse came along and kind of just like shot the bed. Like, here's this really bad, massive multiplayer experience that we're all going to be in, that's shared. And
nobody asked for.
Nobody asked for it. And I said this to someone where I was like, I don't even like being in a room with like, more than 20 people I don't know. Why would I want to be in a metaverse with hundreds of people that I don't know? Right. It's why is that fun? Someone's like just in your space. Or like, have you ever seen like a Twitch stream or like a Discord lobby that has like 100 people in it? It's total chaos.
Yeah, it's chaos.
And because everybody can like hide behind this digital mask and username, like it just makes for a horrible experience. Someone shouting to their mic. Why, who wants that?
You mentioned this before, like that one of the reasons that you were interested in VR and I think architecture was what we were talking about, was escapism, right? Like the kind of the ability to I don't have to escapism just in general. What it is, it's. I feel like a lot of the things that we do in terms of installations and art in general is trying to bring that down to the normal everyday person, right? Like that's what a movie is, right? That's what good music is. That's what going to a festival is, a party, right? It's not like it's a positive escapism. It's like the normal human condition of wanting to just, it's almost like meditation, being in the moment, right? Being in the moment is almost escapism in some super esoteric way or convoluted way. That's it. It is what it is. You're escaping the past and future and just kind of focusing on the now and here and now. And I feel like VR, especially VR, definitely AR, could have like been that beautiful like escapism of the 21st century, in terms it will still be, but it's now brought back a bunch. And yeah, I think corporate greed and like massive capitalist late stage capitalism kind of just was like, yeah, we're not trying to bring that to them. We're not trying to create this experience for everybody. We're just trying to boost up our stock price, make a hype beast, and whatever, jump on the train of whatever's cool now. Buy the Oculus, which is like the running company now, and buy them, run them into the ground, and who cares? Because the stock is going to jump and the board is going to be happy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a shame. But what do you think is going to be like the next like fire under the technology? Like, what do you think is going to be the next kind of innovation that's going to be like, fuck you, Facebook, and kind of like just take over?
For VR?
Yeah, for VR, for AR, I think for just, different realities in that sense.
Yeah, I think it's tough because the problem with XR in general is just the hardware and who has the capital and it's really hard because it's who has the capital, who has the software design capability, who has the hardware design capability, and who has the distribution to make that possible. Like, everybody talks about the iPhone, right? And like Apple really just had all the puzzle pieces together at that time where when they got to iPhone 3, all of a sudden the hardware is good enough that it can run well, the touchscreen worked, it's affordable, the software was actually good enough where it worked, right? It's like iPhone 3, right? Yeah.
I know, but it was still like, I think it was still like $900, right? Like the iPhone was still like...
Oh, really?
Maybe I'm wrong
like
about
500.
that. Was it 500? Maybe you're right. Because the first one was like 900, right? iPhone 1 was like 900 or something. But yeah,
like
sorry.
a Tesla now. Like Tesla, was like $200,000 for a car, like the first one ever. And now it's like 45,000. Like, okay, now we're talking. People can afford that, and people love that car. So I think for XR in general, there just needs to be at least 3 companies in it. Which now I'm really glad because Google and Samsung, Qualcomm just came out with their latest headset.
Which one?
So now
there's
there's
that. Which one?
Yeah, if you Google Project Moohan, Moohan, that's the new Samsung headset, which kind of looks like a nicer Quest Pro.
Oh,
so now we have Meta,
nice.
Apple, and this like crazy, 3-way.
But it's still a VR headset.
It can actually do mixed reality, just
through?
like the Vision Pro. Yeah, it just pass through. So
it's
cool to see all these 3 players in it again. Hopefully they all stay in and keep doing it. I really just think there needs to be more competition between the 3 of them.
Yeah. We'll drive everything to the right place, right?
Yeah, I think the tough part is they're all trying to do this kind of like prosumer use case where it's like, you're going to be able to use this headset to like translate languages on the fly and it's going to change your life and eventually replace your phone. It's like, that should not be the premise. I mean, this is me selfishly speaking as an architect and technologist, but like, you should just make it enterprise or like make it the highest quality experience and give it to people in architecture, give it to people in medical, give it to people in engineering, like people who would pay thousands of dollars for the best experience and use it today, and are not gonna put up with all of like, for example, the meta bullshit around tracking you and
Right.
like having an
Right,
avatar.
right.
You know,
Like
why do I need that?
like their business model now is like the same that it is, right? Of like data aggregation and like ads. And if they just sold like a really high end product, then their business model could just be like, oh, this costs a lot of money and it's enterprise, right? And then they could innovate on that and work it down. Yeah, that's never gonna happen, unfortunately. But
Well,
you know,
I was just talking
it could.
to Taisa Yamamura, who is at Sony, and she's
Okay.
one of the heads of Sony's XR department, and she's great.
They
We
have
were
a great
catching up.
headset. The Sony PlayStation.
Yeah, she was
is a
showing
great
me
one.
the
VR.
XR1, and the XR1 is their enterprise headset that works with like Siemens technology, engineering, architecture apps, medical stuff, and it has this really cool like controller that's like this custom kind of like Y-shaped like bow that goes underneath your finger and thumb, and
Cool.
it's the whole thing is meant for like viewing 3D models in front of you and manipulating them.
Right.
So they've kind of just like eschewed gaming and really focused on enterprise. And honestly, I think it's the coolest, one of the coolest, like
Implementations.
implementations and innovations in XR, because they really are trying to think about like how would a professional have this thing on their desk and then use it every day for a purpose seamlessly. Right?
Is it
it's not like
is it pass through or is it like just clear?
I think it is mostly a VR headset. I might have
Okay.
pass through. I'm not sure. It's not like even out yet, really. It's
Interesting.
still pretty early days for it, but
You've seen
eventually,
the
we want to integrate with it.
hell yeah, you've seen the augmented reality, the new one, I don't know, Orion or
Orion.
No, not Orion.
Yeah.
Is it Orion? Orion, and also
Yeah,
Snapchat
that's
came
the
out
Meta
with one.
And then
Tho-
Samsung, Google, they just came out with one too.
They came out with one, and so
Yeah.
those look cool. You know, I'm excited. I mean, obviously they're super prototypey and they have lots of issues with like frame rate and field of view and stuff like that. But at least there's a push in that direction, because I feel like that is a much more easier thing to adopt than a massive VR headset that costs thousands of dollars. A cool, sleek kind of piece of technology that you can walk around with, I think, is more easier pill to swallow for the prosumer consumer. And then I don't know if you've heard this company. I have to find the name of it, but it's like a Chinese company that does like kind of like the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, but it's like
X-Real?
yes, X-Real.
Yeah.
Yes, X-Real,
Yeah.
exactly, X-Real.
They got
I mean-
sued by Unreal when their name was Nreal. They changed their name.
Did it? I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
didn't know that's really funny. But I mean, like, you just go to their website and it's like, oh, is this like from the future? Like, what the fuck is this? How come I've never heard of this company? How come it's not in America? Like, some of their products are just like amazing. You know, like the way that they're incorporating spatial technology into their phones, and like their pro glasses are like they track. They have head tracking in like a sleek design, and it's like that Orion thing is like already made. You know, it's already existing in some capacity.
Man, China's so ahead, dude. I'm
crazy.
Just like, sometimes, like, why do we live here, man? Like, did you see the Ford CEO? He bought a BYD or a Xiaomi car, and
Xiaomi car?
to test it out, because
Yeah.
Xiaomi, man, I switched from phones to making cars 2 years ago, and their
No way, I
new
didn't know
car
that.
is apparently so fucking sick
Advanced.
that the Ford CEO had it imported. The U.S. puts 100% tariff on it, so basically no one can have it.
Right.
They doubled the price of it.
Oh my God.
But he got it. He got like the SUV version. This is the Ford
Ford
CEO, mind
CEO.
you. He got it, and he says that it's his favorite daily driver.
No way.
He was like, I'm gonna
what
keep
a
this
what
car.
a
He said
fu
this in
to
Car
like
and
the
Driver magazine.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's
But I think
so
it just kind of
funny.
speaks to how like enshittified the American tech industry has become. Right? Google's terrible. You search for something, and it's like you don't get it. You just get a bunch of sponsored ads that are not even correctly linked to sponsored.
I mean, it's
like Apple products. They're pretty bad. Like, why does Foveate not work on my iPhone that well, but it works on?
I
the
think
Android
it's like
from
what
5
we
years
said.
ago?
You know, it's it's late stage capitalism without any regard for like what people want and like innovation. I think since Jobs died, or maybe even before that, like innovation kind of just like isn't important for market capture and for like, and for investors. What is important for them is like data aggregation, manipulation of markets, monopolization of markets. That's what's important, like if imagine if like Apple, if they didn't have the laws that they passed of like of like forcing them to like make their products easier to fix and things like that. I can't remember the word for it, but they make their products right to repair, but then they make their products on purpose so that they break. That's like a
planned
normal
obsolescence.
thing. Planned obsolescence. Thank you. That's like a normal thing. If that law wouldn't have passed, then like they would have just gone even deeper down into that thing. And it's like, where is the company that changed the world? Like where is that company? And I think there's all the company not here. And it's same with Google, right? Like made the internet. It's so I think that like China, say all you want about like communism and whatever, like at least they're focused on like actually making products that make your life better. And like they're focused on like innovation, and they're focused on like capturing the market, not by like strong manning or like manipulating the market, but like because their shit is good, and that's like kind of what America was maybe when we were kids, like 20, 30 years ago, and like now it's just late stage capitalism is just garbage. And I feel like, I hope things will change. I think that they'll have to change because I just feel like they'll have to change. Something will have to change. Like maybe there'll be some massive crash or some massive, who knows what will happen. Hopefully it won't be like a war or anything like that, but something will have to change.
I think it's interesting because, Steve Jobs, he used to work for, I believe it was for HP, and he was talking about, when he was young, HP was huge. They were like the biggest company on earth. And then after that, he wanted to go work for like IBM or something, or like one of those. It was Xerox. And he got rejected from working at Xerox. And then, eventually would go on to start Apple, and Xerox is basically dead. Like Xerox doesn't exist anymore. He's saying how the product people at Xerox, eventually got phased out because they made the product so good that innovation didn't drive anything anymore. You don't need innovation when you already have a monopoly and you have the best product. You just need more sales and marketing. So then those people get a boost in the company, and eventually the organization just becomes those people. And then the company forgets how to create a new product. I don't think Apple's quite there yet.
Well, what's his name? Johnny just left the company, right? Johnny Ive. He just left the company.
I think that definitely has had an impact on the design side, because whoever designed the new Photos app, this shit is garbage. So I cannot, like, there was nothing wrong with the old one. Somehow
I'm surprised you use an iPhone, to be honest.
Yeah, me too. I use a PC, so it makes even less sense that I have an iPhone. But
dude, just
all my family members have one, so
just do it. You can get the same phone, if not better, for half the price. And you can get a better phone for the same price.
That Samsung Z Fold is pretty cool. One of my friends has those. Yeah. I was like,
I'm a OnePlus boy. I love it.
Oh, okay.
I like, it's like it feels like a premium phone. It does everything that a premium phone does, but it costs $500 less than a premium phone. I love it. Yeah. I'm super happy with it.
The Z Fold I like. So I'm just amazed that they were able to create a curved screen that folds.
Definitely.
And, like, it's touch capacitive.
The Fold. I don't have $1,000 to spend on a phone, but if the moment I need to get like a new iPad or something, I'm definitely going to get a folding phone. They're so cool, and I've seen like people use them in like the real world as their daily driver, and it's like, oh, that makes total sense. Like you have the same device in two device, like that's awesome.
Oh, dude, this reminds me. There's this one woman. Her name was Kyungnan Kim. She was the head curator at Mori Pacific Museum back when we were doing an installation there. No relation to me, but she's a total boss. Okay. And I remember, because she's in charge of the museum, so she would have to like go to every room, and she would come down and check on us when we were installing sometimes. And the way that this woman got so much done was that her Android phone was her device. And she carried around with her, and this is how Koreans are like on another level, a fucking Bluetooth foldable keyboard that is spring-loaded. Nice. So you just click it and it opens up. So she would just, like, she got an email, she was looking at it, and her phone case had like the pop-out stand. So she would just set up her phone like on a table stand, then open up the Bluetooth keyboard, just unfold, and just like grind out a whole document.
She was like way ahead,
minutes.
Huh? Yeah.
Yeah, wherever she was. This is back in like 2018. So I remember looking at her being like, oh my God. Like, she got the phone with like the 24-hour battery life, the Bluetooth keyboard. She's mobile. All right. She's taking all the calls. And Koreans, they use Kakao Talk. Like, that's their chat app. It's kind of like Korea's WeChat. So you can do calls, texts, mail, like everything from it.
Nice.
So she's just running the business from there, you know?
Hell
it was crazy. I was like, damn. I want to be like that.
Well, my friend, this was awesome. Super nice talking to you and getting to know you a little bit better and learning about Foveate. Is there anything you want to share with us before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I mean, I would just reiterate, like, I owe a lot to, this touch community in particular. You guys have helped me so much. Yeah, with my project's Blender as well. But yeah, would love to have people use it and hopefully get value out of it, and eventually I would love to make some more video content like this that maybe helps folks in the community talk about how they can best communicate their projects and even help with their businesses. I remember Elbers, he had this one great comment where he was like, a lot of people, folks in the touch community, they think they need to hire another developer, but maybe they need to hire a business person or a salesperson or an assistant,
nice.
Someone who can help them with things that's not exactly the thing that they're good at.
And they could focus
that's
on
kind
that
of
thing. Yeah,
right.
That.
And that's kind of why I made Foveate, because it's like, oh, how can I help every single person in the touch community, in architecture, in engineering, communicate what we're trying to build here? Because I can only do so much as one person, right? But if I build a platform that can help everybody, we raise all boats.
Hell yeah, bro. I could not agree more with you. And again, much appreciated for you to come on and spend the time and show us the product. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. This was a pleasure.
Wow. What an episode. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Mantis Smash for the intro and outro music. Thank you to Sophie Holder for the amazing internship helping us with all the episodes. And thank you to the guests for coming on and spending time with us. See you next week.